Chapter 201. Under the influence of the purplish-gold fog, the light instantly blossomed and a tyrannical aura soared into the sky, adding a huge amount of dark energy to the dark clouds that Chi-Yu had brought. Under normal circumstances, the dark energy would only affect Chi-Yu's energy, but it was different now. After Chi-Yu had transformed into Blood Kirin, his energy had also begun to approach the dark energy due to his semi-demonized state. The sudden eruption of energy from Su Qing's body not only had no effect on him, but also had a certain supportive effect. In addition, the dark energy that had erupted from Su Qing had affected the experts of the Vatican to a certain extent, which imperceptibly increased the power of the infinitely changing Jade Pearl Realm technique. In this way, Chi-Yu, who was in the infinitely changing Jade Pearl Realm technique, was even more like a fish in water, and his murderous aura soared. Under the influence of the purplish-gold light, Su Qing let out a long, ear-piercing scream that seemed to destroy everything. All the glass in Dracula Castle completely shattered at this moment, and the purplish-gold light abruptly converged. No, it should be said that the light condensed toward her delicate body. From the eruption to the withdrawal, Su Qing's body had already begun to change in a short period of time. Unlike the terrifying appearance that ordinary vampires would have when they transformed, Su Qing's body had slightly swelled up in the purplish-gold blood fog, but she was not very strong. Instead, she had become much more slender than before. Her well-proportioned long legs and her skin looked even fairer. The wings that had been produced after her transformation had disappeared and were replaced by a purplish-gold cloak. The cloak was very large, and the collar directly covered her snow-white neck, while the back hem of the cloak covered her entire body. Her long black hair had turned into a deep purple, and at the same time, her eyes had also turned purple, with a dot of golden light in the center of each eye. Although they both had purple eyes, Su Qing's purple was different from Yamu's purple. Yamu's eyes were a clear and light purple, but Su Qing's were a deep purple, and her aura was constantly expanding. Su Qing's delicate face seemed to have undergone some changes. The originally beautiful blade at this moment had a somewhat evil luster, and her pretty face had become even more attractive. However, that terrifying murderous aura gave men a very strange feeling. At least all the vampires from the Dracula family who were present looked at Su Qing with reverence. The purplish-gold energy continued to contract, leaving a faint purplish-gold pattern on Su Qing's skin. With every movement, her body would leave a series of afterimages. Her body looked like it was no longer corporeal. Light flashed, and a purple light in the shape of a heart appeared in front of Su Qing's chest. Even the fluctuation of her heartbeat remained the same. She slowly closed her eyes and stretched out her arms in the air. Her bones crackled. No one knew how she was doing right now. After all, in the history of vampires, even Cain Dracula had not reached the level of a blood emperor. Her hands gradually turned purplish gold. That was because the purplish gold patterns gradually extended from her palms to her fingers. The light gradually solidified, and on each of Su Qing's hands, 5 purplish gold fingernails grew out. They were like cones, and they shone with an incomparably delicate light. Moreover, the patterns on them looked extremely fine. If one were to look closely, they would discover that each of her 10-foot-long fingernails had a tiny hole. These tiny holes did not affect the sharpness of the fingernails. A powerful light flashed, and Su Qing let out another scream. The vampires could not control their bodies at all, and they all knelt on the ground in worship. Their bodies were trembling slightly. The Blood Kindred's unprecedented super-powerhouse was finally born because of Klinsmann's sacrifice and Dracula's primordial blood. Su Qing's gaze seemed to solidify, and the 2 purplish-gold lights stared at the dark red clouds in front of her. She did not move, and quietly felt the process of the huge dark energy around her condensing into her body. The 2 spots of golden light in her purplish-gold eyes gradually disappeared, and a water droplet-like mark appeared on her forehead. The mark was very strange. When it first appeared, it was gold, but it quickly turned purple, and then from purple to dark red. Finally, it formed a dark red mark with purple and gold curved patterns on it. The original water droplet also gradually changed from the shape of a water droplet to the shape of a crown. It looked a little strange, but it was filled with an incomparably violent energy. That was the king's energy of the blood kindred. Perhaps it was affected by Su Qing's energy aura. Dracula's castle suddenly began to tremble slowly. When Su Qing's body slowly turned around, a black stream of air suddenly shot up from the center of the castle. In an instant, it had already risen to the end of the sky. When it converged with the dark clouds in the sky, the black pillar of air turned blood-red. With it as the center, the surrounding dark clouds gradually turned blood-red. From within the blood-red clouds, an incomparably bright blood-red light suddenly filled the sky. As the blood-red light burst forth, a golden light instantly flew in Su Qing's direction. Su Qing's body was swallowed by the blood-red light, and an evil aura instantly bloomed. When Su Qing turned around again, there were two identical things in her hand. The vampires crawling on the ground seemed to feel something, and at the same time, their bodies trembled as they slowly raised their heads. They could clearly see that in each of Su Qing's hands there was a 2-foot-long fang, and her purplish-gold long nails were now wrapped around the fang, as if the 2 fangs had grown from her palms. The fangs were blood-red, just like rubies. They shone with a sparkling luster, and circles of blood mist constantly emitted from Su Qing's body. Her previously tyrannical aura suddenly retracted, as if she was attracted by the 2 long fangs in her hands. The body of a vampire Grand Duke suddenly trembled violently, and 2 lines of blood-red tears flowed down Elder Hua's face. Oh my God! Zhu Deji has finally awakened from his arrogance, and awakened when our Dracula family is about to be destroyed. This is the grace of the agricultural bank. That must be the only artifact passed down in our Dracula family since ancient times, the blood god puppet, the artifact left behind by our great ancestor Cain. This Grand Duke was right. At this moment, what Su Qing was holding in her hands was the only artifact of the Dracula family, the blood god puppet. As early as 10,000 years ago, the blood god puppet had already disappeared. Successive generations of Dracula family masters had spent a lot of time searching for its existence. The blood god puppet was a magic treasure that could increase the strength of vampires by more than 30%. With it, the status of the vampires in the Dark Parliament would be completely different. With the appearance of the Blood Emperor, Su Qing had completely become the most powerful existence in the history of vampires. Her aura had attracted the blood god puppet hidden in the Dracula castle. At the same time, because she had drunk Cain's blood, with the help of Cain's aura, the blood god puppet immediately recognized her as its master when it appeared. At this moment, Su Qing was completely different from before. Even if Klinsmann was reborn, he could only kneel in front of her. That incomparably powerful aura of the Blood Clan King was something that no vampires could resist. The experts of the Vatican did not sense the changes that had happened to Su Qing. The art of infinite changes was indeed magical. As long as one was within it, everything that happened in the outside world would be completely isolated. The art of infinite changes created a special space. Other than Qiyu himself, as long as it had not been broken, the people inside could only sense what Qiyu wanted them to see. Filled with the bloodthirsty light of demonization, the blood sword in Qiyu's hand swept past the waist of the 25th expert from the Vatican, who was dressed in white, and another body was cut in half. In less than 10 minutes, 25 experts from the Vatican had died in his hands, including many experts at the level of a bishop. However, in front of the Blood Kirin, they were not even qualified to resist. Of course, the 4 red-robed archbishops did not just stand by and watch. Other than Raphael Novaisky, who had transformed into the Angel of Light, the other 3 red-robed archbishops were doing their best to release their holy light. However, within the art of infinite changes, not only was their holy light greatly weakened, but at the same time, Chi-Yu used the special ability of the Sumeru seed in the art of infinite changes to separate the three of them, as well as Inzaghi and Raphael, in 5 different directions. The space between them had been expanded to the maximum by Chi-Yu, so they could not see each other, and the holy light that they used could not be condensed at all. After reaching the 7-cloud realm, how could a single red-robed archbishop break the domain that Chi-Yu had displayed? Fear had already appeared in their hearts, because other than Raphael, the other 3 red-robed archbishops were trying to transform into archangels. However, they were shocked to find that they could not connect with the aura of the heavens at all, and were completely isolated in this special space. In this way, they could not transform into archangels, and could only use the powerful holy light. However, the holy light could only play a limited role in this extremely special space that was made public to the world. They could only watch helplessly as their subordinates were destroyed by Chi-Yu one by one, but there was nothing they could do. The blood-red figure appeared once again. This time, he appeared in the place where, other than the 4 red-robed archbishops and the presiding judge, there was the last member of the Vatican. From the graceful figure, it was obvious that it was a woman. However, at this time, Chi-Yu, who had transformed into Blood Kirin, no longer had any thoughts about men or women. He raised the blood sword in his hand once again, and the terrifying aura in the form of incomparably worried and sickly waved it for the 26th time. When the last expert of the Vatican was destroyed, the next to be unlucky were the top experts of the Vatican. Chi-Yu, just as the blood sword was brandished, the woman suddenly let out a scream. Chi-Yu's blood sword only swung a foot before it quietly stopped in midair. His body even trembled violently, as if he had suffered a special attack. The woman in white from the Vatican trembled slightly, showing the fear in her heart. Quietly, she slowly retreated in midair. Chi-Yu did not remain in a daze for too long. The Blood Kirin tattoo on his chest suddenly lit up, causing him to wake up from his daze. He raised the blood sword in his hand once again. This time, the blood-red light in his eyes became even more resolute. At this time, Raphael, who had already recovered from his initial injuries, finally moved. As the Angel of Light, one of the 6 archangels, he was undoubtedly the strongest among the experts of the Vatican. Seeing that Chi-Yu had killed so many experts of the Vatican, he could no longer endure it. He knew that if he did not destroy the strange boundary in front of him, then everyone here would eventually become the prey of the Blood Kirin. The final result would be the same as the experts of the Vatican. Therefore, he moved. Golden flames ignited from every part of Raphael's body. The enormous flames made his pure body look even more holy. The moment the golden flames appeared, it was just as Chi-Yu brandished the blood sword twice. Even though his mind was no longer clear, the aura brought by the golden flames still made Chi-Yu suddenly match it. He wisely gave up on the prey in front of him, and with a teleportation, appeared behind Raphael. The blood-red sword light, with a long rainbow and an incomparably sharp aura, suddenly slashed towards Raphael's back. The art of 1,000 possibilities and 100 changes was Chi-Yu's greatest trump card. He absolutely could not let anyone destroy it. However, Raphael was indeed worthy of being one of the 6 archangels. The skill he was using now was one of the ultimate skills of the 6 archangels. It was called sacrifice. It was to sacrifice oneself in exchange for the most powerful energy. Therefore, his body was burning. Every bit of energy in his body was burning intensely. As soon as the blood sword entered the range of the golden flames, the blade suddenly trembled violently. The blood-red resentment energy actually turned into ashes in the burning golden flames. Although Chi-Yu's all-out slash had blasted Raphael's body away, it had not been able to split him in half. Raphael spat out a mouthful of golden blood and turned around in midair. He stared into Chi-Yu's eyes and shouted, "Evil will never prevail over justice. Great Emperor of Heaven, please bestow upon me the greatest power to destroy the evil in front of me and let light return to the world." Raphael's body disappeared, completely engulfed by the golden flames. His proud body had already turned into an angel with 6 golden flames condensed into wings and instantly flew into the sky. The golden flames formed a dazzling shadow in the sky. In the blink of an eye, the golden angel had already disappeared in midair. The muscles on Chi-Yu's face twitched a few times. The blood sword in his hand disappeared, and his hands rapidly changed various hand shapes in front of him. However, the entire Great Transformation Realm technique of Big Dipper started to tremble at this moment. The changes in Chi-Yu's hands became more and more rapid. However, the Great Transformation Realm technique of Big Dipper was also shaking more and more violently. How could the sacrifice of an archangel bring about such a huge amount of energy? Simply put, it was just like when Chi-Yu used the ultimate explosion of Kirin's arm. The energy brought about by sacrifice could be said to be several times more than what Raphael currently possessed. The 3 red-robed archbishops and Chief Judge Inzaghi were deeply shocked by the scene in front of them. As the highest echelons of the Vatican, they all understood what the Great Transformation Realm represented. When an archangel descended into this world, they did not really come. What came here was just a portion of their divine essence and a portion of their energy. It was about 1/100th of the archangel's energy. Therefore, the use of the Great Transformation Realm technique at this moment would not cause Raphael to truly die. But even so, once the Great Transformation Realm technique was used, Noves would not be able to summon Raphael for at least 100 days. This was the shortest estimate, and it could even be longer. After all, the Great Transformation Realm technique had only been used when the Vatican and the Dark Parliament fought against the Dreadlord. The violent tremble was followed by the destruction. However, no matter how magical the Great Transformation Realm technique of Big Dipper was, it had its limit. Chi-Yu had the strength of a 7 clouds. In terms of overall strength, under the circumstances that he did not use the Xianyuan sword, he was only on par with Raphael in terms of strength. It was the same when he fought against the Dreadlord. His strength was at least a notch lower than the Dreadlord's, and it was completely because after the Archangel used the Great Transformation Realm technique of Big Dipper, Chi-Yu could not stop him with his own strength. Therefore, the Great Transformation Realm technique of Big Dipper was unsurprisingly destroyed. Su Qing floated quietly in midair, the blood god puppet in her hand flickering with a strange light. Her deep purple eyes suddenly changed, and then a ray of golden light suddenly shone from the dark red light in front of her. When this ray of golden light first appeared, it was only as thick as a finger, but once the golden light broke through the dark red light, it rapidly spread to the surroundings. She could clearly see that the dark red light, under the influence of the golden light, melted like snow. A golden figure shot into the sky. After the 6-winged seraph Raphael used the Great Transformation Realm technique of Big Dipper, he had already rushed into the sky in the blink of an eye. Even the blood clouds could not stop the golden figure, and he disappeared in an instant. With a bang, countless murderous intent and enormous energy exploded in all directions. Dozens of corpses fell from the sky, and in the blink of an eye, they had already landed heavily on the ground. The vampires, who liked the new and hated the old, were shocked to see that none of the corpses that landed on the ground were complete. They had all been chopped into 2 at the waist. Even the vampires, who were usually very cruel, could not help but look at each other in shock when they suddenly saw 25 corpses like this. What they saw was not only corpses, but also endless murderous intent. Floating in midair, Chi-Yu spat out a mist of blood. However, the murderous intent on his body did not decrease, but instead showed signs of increasing. The blood sword appeared in his hand once again, and a tyrannical aura surrounded his body. His cold eyes looked extremely terrifying. No one could stop all of this from happening, and no one could stop the battle from continuing. The faces of the 3 red-robed archbishops had become abnormally pale. In Gasal's arms, Novitsky, who had already sunk into a deep coma, was even spasming slightly. After fusing with Raphael, he could be said to have become a part of the Angel of Light's body. Raphael had used the Great Transformation Realm technique, and at the same time, he had emptied all of his holy power, causing serious damage to his body. Therefore, not only did Nowitzki lose the ability to fight, but even his life had been threatened to a certain extent. After all, he was already an old man over 70 years old, and he did not have the terrifying regenerative ability that Chi Yu had. The three red-robed archbishops who were still conscious had very ugly expressions on their faces. It had been many years since they had felt anger in their hearts. However, seeing dozens of their subordinates die so tragically, and seeing Raphael use the Great Transformation Realm technique in close quarters, how could their hearts remain calm? The last expert of the Vatican quietly floated to the ground and slowly retreated into the distance. The battle just now had clearly left a lingering fear in her heart. If Raphael had not used the Great Transformation Realm technique in time, she might have been slashed by Chi Yu. Chi Yu, who had completely completed the Blood Kirin, was definitely a terrifying existence. Even if she was powerful, she would not be willing to collide with Chi Yu at this time. That special energy was not something she could withstand. The three red-robed archbishops' gazes were all fixed on Chi Yu. Golden light burned from their bodies almost at the same time, and a huge energy beam broke through the sky. The blood clouds in the sky could not stop the energy wave that was filled with holy aura. The huge energy completely descended at this moment, and the three red-robed archbishops were completely enraged. There was only one result of their anger. This time, it was not just one archangel, but three. Just like how the Dark Council summoned the Dreadlord, the Vatican also had to pay a price to summon an archangel. However, it was different from the Dark World. What they paid was not the souls or the blood clouds, but the state of their own bodies. Every time they summoned an archangel, their own holy power would not be able to improve for at least a year, and they could only return to their original peak state. Of course, Nowitzki's situation was even more serious this time. He did not know when he would be able to summon Raphael again, and he did not know when his body would recover. Under the resistance of the golden energy, Nowitzki's body was sent in front of the retreating experts of the Vatican. 3 golden lights shone at the same time, and the bodies of the 3 red-robed archbishops, led by Paulo Gasol, were completely wrapped in the golden light. Although Chi Yu was already a little unconscious, he knew that the 3 red-robed archbishops were doing something that could threaten him. He rushed out almost without hesitation. He would not be able to use the shape-shifting Jade Pearl Realm technique for a period of time. However, even without teleportation, his speed was definitely the fastest among these powerhouses. His blood sword had already arrived in front of the golden light that Pau Gasol had transformed into, leaving behind a string of afterimages. The last afterimage was still where he had been floating. The blood-red sword light slashed the golden light without any fancy moves, and the surging energy aura instantly flashed. The gold and red lights collided in the air, and with a loud bang, Chi Yu's blood-red body was sent flying. He flipped a few times in the air before stabilizing his body. His blood-red eyes revealed a trace of confusion, as he clearly did not expect his attack to turn out like this. How could the process of summoning be interrupted so easily? If that was the case, the 3 red-robed archbishops would not have summoned him in front of him. Whether it was the summoning of a dreadlord or an archangel, as long as the summoning started, the opponent would not be able to disrupt the summoning unless the opponent had strength that surpassed the summoners. In other words, unless Chi Yu's strength could surpass that of a true archangel in the celestial realm, this summoning could not be disrupted. Although Chi Yu was very strong now, he was still not as beautiful as an archangel who was worshipped as a god in the human world. Therefore, it was very normal for his attack to fail. Just as Chi Yu was about to rush forward again, a hand appeared on his shoulder. Just as the blood sword was about to turn around and slash out, a cold voice rang in his ear. Let me fight with you. They are also my enemies. Slowly turning his head, Qi Yu saw Su Qing's purple eyes. His body slowed down slightly, and he slowly nodded. Taking a deep breath, Qi Yu floated in the air, absorbing large amounts of energy particles in the air. The huge amount of energy caused his killing intent to grow stronger and stronger, and black patterns had already started to appear in his blood-red eyes. His blood-red eyes were just the beginning of demonization. Once he entered the true state of demonization, he would never be able to recover. Before leaving the Dark Parliament, Lung Er had left something in his heart. Actually, Lung Er did not want to have such an impact on Qi Yu. However, Qi Yu happened to meet Ming Ming, who almost died, and Klinsmann sacrificed his life to save Su Qing. Under the intense stimulation, the darkness in his heart completely erupted. In addition, he had killed 25 people, causing the hatred in his heart and the killing intent in his body to accumulate to the peak. Therefore, the true demonization had finally begun. Once it was completed, Qi Yu would no longer be a Zodiac guardian warrior, but a murderous demon king. No matter how strong his mental strength was, he would lose all consciousness, and only the instinct to kill remained. Enough, do you want to shame the Xianyuan sword? A majestic voice sounded in Qi Yu's heart. His body, which was floating in the air, suddenly trembled violently. Then, a golden light shot out from between his eyebrows and rose into the air in the blink of an eye. The whole body of the Xianyuan sword was suspended above Qi Yu's head, and the tip of the sword pointed downwards, pointing directly at the Baihui acupoint on the top of Qi Yu's head. The intense golden light was unusually sharp, and in an instant, it formed a cage-like sword light that enveloped Qi Yu's body. At this moment, a huge amount of energy bloomed completely. On the body of the Xianyuan sword, the sun, the moon, and the stars released the vital qi of heaven and earth at the same time, like circles of golden ripples, constantly attacking every cell in Qi Yu's body. At the same time, an illusory Kirin Su Liang floated out of Qi Yu's body. No, it was not Kirin, but Xie, who had been living in Qi Yu's body for more than a year. Although it was only an illusory energy shadow, Xie's eyes were so clear. When it first appeared, the huge energy light was completely released in front of Qi Yu, and the pure energy breath blocked the front of Qi Yu. The Xianyuan sword restricted Qi Yu's body, and at this time, Xie became the key to attracting the vital qi of heaven and earth. The huge shadow slowly condensed in midair, suddenly transforming into a special energy figure. In the blink of an eye, it had already rushed in front of Qi Yu. The Xie's eyes revealed a deep light as it met Qi Yu's blood-red eyes. Enormous energy undulated rhythmically, each wave of energy producing a special wave effect. The Xie was known as the magical beast of the ancient beasts. Even amongst the divine beasts, it was the embodiment of justice. The Xianyuan sword's energy was exceedingly sharp, and under its guidance, it completely rushed into Qi Yu's body. The invincible Xianyuan sword smashed the murderous aura on Qi Yu's body. The huge energy breath and even the energy fluctuations produced a special effect. With a slight smile, the energy rhythmically moved in the air, and each energy breath produced a special scene in the air. Under the stimulation of the Xianyuan sword and Xie at the same time, Qi Yu's body began to tremble violently, and a bloody light continued to spread out from his body. Every time it spread out, it would immediately be smashed by the Xianyuan sword, leaving no trace at all. Chapter 202. The Xianyuan sword was still hovering above Qi Yu's head. It exuded a majestic aura, suppressing Qi Yu's body to the point that he could not move at all. As the most powerful offensive artifact among the 10 great ancient artifacts, he would never allow his master to become a murderous demon. Although he was also murderous, he was still a sword of justice that stood on the side of justice. Qi Yu's body began to shake in the air with a muffled groan. After the blood-red light had transformed, his skin had turned pale. Although the huge murderous aura and resentment had given him great strength in a short period of time, it had also greatly affected his body. At this time, under the stimulation of the righteousness of heaven and earth, although the evil chi had gradually subsided, and the thundercloud force had regained its dominant position, his mind was gradually awakened. However, his body had suffered serious injuries, especially when Raphael used the sacrifice skill to break the 1,000 changes of the 4 stars realm technique. The injuries left behind had begun to spread in his body. As soon as he regained consciousness, everything that he had experienced just now suddenly flashed through his mind like a movie. Of course, Chi Yu did not regret killing those experts of the Vatican, but he could not help but feel a flash of fear. What's wrong with me? Am I going to destroy myself? Since when did I lose control of my emotions so much? He took a deep breath. After all, he was the king of the Zodiac. With the combined efforts of the Xie and the Xianyuan sword, he immediately made the right choice. As soon as his mind cleared, he made the right decision. He released all of the blood Kirin's resentment that was still in his body. At the same time, he began to absorb a huge amount of nature energy from the forest around Dracula Castle to replenish his body. Using the source of nature as the foundation, the green specks of light could clearly be seen condensing towards Chi Yu's body from all directions. The specks of green light looked extremely crystalline, and even Su Qing, who was filled with darkness energy, did not reject the pure energy of nature. "Qing I'm sorry. It's all because of me," Chi Yu said to Su Qing sadly. When she saw the changes in Chi Yu's body, a faint glow appeared in the depths of Su Qing's eyes. She said, "There's no need to apologize to me. Let's deal with everything in front of us first. Chi Yu, from now on, my name is no longer Su Qing. Please call me Christy." At this moment, the golden radiance in midair had completely coalesced. 3 golden figures soared into the sky, and a massive pressure emerged along with the blood clouds dispersing in the golden radiance. 3 blazing angels with 6 wings on their backs appeared before Chi Yu and Christy. The 6 eyes of the 3 blazing angels were shining with golden light, and they were filled with anger. It was obvious that they were enraged by Raphael's use of sacrifice. After a brief emotional fluctuation, Chi Yu had completely awakened from the previous nightmare. He silently apologized to Xianyuan's sword and Xie. At this moment, there was no more time for him to adjust his body's state. He slowly closed his eyes, and then suddenly opened them. The blood-red radiance disappeared completely, and the domineering silver radiance reappeared. Purple, blue, red, and cyan radiance rose from behind Chi Yu at the same time. Huge energy fluctuations began to emerge. Yes, the 4 auspicious clouds in Kirin had returned. With the nature energy, Chi Yu forcibly suppressed his injuries and raised the 4 types of thundercloud force to the limit. Through Kirin's most basic energy, it began to transform rapidly. The real battle was about to begin. This might also be the last battle. It was 2 against 3, and the 3 opponents were celestial archangels. Chi Yu, who had recovered his composure, was no longer surprised or happy. The blood Kirin, which was full of murderous intent and resentment, had returned to Ink Kirin. Although his body was injured, his heart had received the harshest training. At this moment, his temperament had changed slightly. The light in his eyes had become less oppressive than before, but more neutral and peaceful. "Were you the ones who made Zephyr use sacrifice?" The blazing angel summoned by Gasol coldly stared at Chi Yu and Christy beside him as he spoke in an awe-inspiring tone. A strong murderous intent filled the air, and the surrounding air seemed to start to solidify at his voice. Chi Yu replied indifferently, "That's right, I did it. If you want to take revenge for that birdman, then come and find me. Could it be that only you are allowed to kill, and we are not allowed to kill that birdman? What's so great about having 6 wings? In the end, he's just a birdman." "Nonsense. We are angels, great archangels. What birdman? You have insulted the dignity of heaven." We will punish you on behalf of the Emperor Heaven. The blazing angel on the left looked at Chi-Yu as if his eyes were about to spit fire. Almost in an instant, the bodies of the three archangels burned with golden pincers at the same time. That was a sign that they had raised their divine power to the limit. Chi-Yu, who had recovered his consciousness, naturally wouldn't rush forward as fiercely as before. His heart was filled with regret. If he had been clear-headed when he had used the art of infinite changes, then he would undoubtedly have been able to bring out the characteristics of the art of infinite changes even better. Perhaps these three cardinals would not have had the chance to summon angels at all. Unfortunately, it was too late to say anything now. The momentary change had caused him to lose the ability to use the great transformation of the Big Dipper realm technique. The Chilean stealth had been severely damaged by Raphael's sacrifice technique, and it needed to be nourished by the power of his origin before it could recover its original strength, just like the Chilean mirror that had been damaged by the terrifying demon king Matawikia. After calming down, the first thing Chi-Yu needed to do was to stall for time. He had already discovered from Raphael that these so-called blazing angels were actually very simple-minded. His current state wasn't the best. Su Qing had also just experienced a change in her body, and her energy was still unstable. The longer he could stall for time, the more advantageous it would be for the two of them. Wait, don't attack first. Chi-Yu shouted, causing the three archangels who were about to attack to pause. They were still self-righteous, so they naturally wouldn't attack when Chi-Yu was speaking. The archangel in the middle glared at Chi-Yu and said in a deep voice, "What else do you have to say?" Chi-Yu, of course there is. Since the three of you are powerful archangels and have 6 wings, why don't you let us know your names first? Didn't you call yourselves great? Even if you die, you should let us know who killed you. The three blazing angels' expressions became slightly better. The blazing angel on the left said, "It doesn't matter if we let you know. We are the most powerful heavenly god before the Emperor Heaven. I am the angel of charm, Hania." The blazing angel on the right said, "I am the angel of defense, Kamal." This was the first sentence he had said since he appeared. Just like Parker, he spoke very little. The blazing angel in the middle said proudly, "I am the angel of law, Uriel. Your crimes are already unforgivable and must be punished by the heavens. Surrender, and I can minimize the pain you'll have to endure." After listening to the self-introductions of the three blazing angels, Chi-Yu's heart sank slightly. He knew that this blazing angel was definitely not weaker than Raphael in terms of strength. He was still confident in winning if he fought one-on-one. After all, the blazing angel wouldn't be stronger than the Dreadlord. However, even if the blazing angel wasn't as strong as the Dreadlord, the difference wouldn't be too huge. If there were 2 blazing angels, it could be said that he had no chance at all. If he had the 1,000 transformations technique, perhaps he could still fight. But now, it seemed that it would be very difficult. He could only hope that Christie, who had obtained Klinsmann's energy, would have some amazing abilities. After fully sensing the energy situation in his body, the pure thundercloud force had returned to normal. The negative effects of the blood Kirin had completely disappeared under the simultaneous effects of the Xianyuan sword and Xieji. The feeling of rejection from the Xianyuan sword had also disappeared. Lifting his head, Chi-Yu clamped the tip of the Xianyuan sword between his right index and middle fingers. With a twist of his wrist, the huge Xianyuan sword drew a circle in the air and the huge hilt fell into Chi-Yu's grasp. The Xianyuan sword's special aura entered his body, causing Chi-Yu to feel a sense of comfort throughout his body. He once again felt a sense of closeness from the sword, greatly increasing his confidence. The Xianyuan sword pointed towards the sky, his gaze already starting to focus. The 3 archangels' gazes were originally focused on Chi-Yu and Christie. At this moment, when Chi-Yu raised his hand to grasp the sword, they were instantly startled by the aura emanating from the Xianyuan sword. How could they not feel the tyrannical energy waves? They exchanged glances with each other and revealed a trace of hesitation. The Angel of Law spread his 6 wings, lifted his head, and spat out a mouthful of golden radiance into the air. As soon as the golden radiance rose into the air, it expanded into a golden light cup and disappeared in the blink of an eye. The instant the golden halo disappeared, the 3 archangels finally began their attacks. The 6 wings on their backs were fully extended, absorbing the energy particles of the light attribute from the air. 3 holy swords coalesced from golden energy appeared in their hands. The Angel of Law, Ulier, pointed his holy sword towards the horizon. After charging forward for 100 meters, he suddenly came to a stop. On the other hand, the Charm of Destiny, Hania, and the Defense Angel, Kamal, charged towards Chi-Yu and Christie respectively. Chi-Yu floated in place without moving. His gaze was completely locked onto Charm Angel Hania. Christie, on the other hand, took the initiative to attack. Her figure flashed and disappeared. A purplish-golden radiance appeared behind Kamal. As soon as he flitted past, 2 crimson rays of light pierced his temple and throat. Kamal's movements were as fast as lightning. Before the 2 crimson rays of light reached him, his body had already been stimulated. Cold, evil, and darkness that was the opposite of light restrained Kamal's energy. Kamal wasn't flustered by the sudden attack. His body that was charging forward abruptly came to a complete halt. Shortly after, a ring of golden radiance mixed with milky white energy erupted from his body, forming an oval-shaped light barrier that enveloped his entire body. The holy light spiritual formation that required the 3 archbishops to work together was instantly activated by him. That's right, it was absolutely instantaneous. As the Angel of Defense, he was the strongest among the 6 archangels in terms of defense. Therefore, he was always able to react in the shortest time possible against an enemy's attack. The crimson crystal accurately hit the holy light spiritual formation. The 2 sharp points simultaneously exploded with a strong light. The blood god puppet didn't show the slightest fear in the face of the strong holy light. Instead, it produced a strong rejection. Su Qing's purple eyes lit up. At the same time, her body lit up, and a tyrannical energy filled the blood god puppet in an instant. 2 slender fangs made ear-piercing grinding sounds as they broke through the holy light spiritual formation, which had extremely strong defensive abilities. They were already close to Defense Angel Kamar's body. Kamal wasn't the only one who didn't expect this. No one expected Christie's attack to be so tyrannical. Although the 3 archangels were summoned and had their own consciousness, they also had the memories of the 3 archbishops. In their memories, Su Qing's power wasn't enough to threaten them. Even if her body changed, she wouldn't become stronger. However, Su Qing had left a deep impression on Kamal. Kamal's reaction was still very fast. In the face of danger, his body suddenly swayed. Relying on the holy light spiritual formation's friction against the blood god puppet, its speed was greatly reduced. At the same time, a milky white gem lit up on his chest, forming a milky white circle of energy that surged in Christie's direction. Amidst the loud bang, the 2 of them separated in an instant. Christie's eyes were still as cold as ever, and the purplish-golden radiance on her body became even stronger. On the other hand, Kamal looked a little embarrassed. His pure white angel robe had 2 holes, and the tip of Su Qing's blood god puppet was stained with a trace of golden blood. Kamal relied on his tyrannical energy to repel Su Qing. However, the blood god puppet's attack was too terrifying. In just an instant, it still pierced his body. A strong suction force came over. If it wasn't for Kamal's energy explosion that pushed Christie back, perhaps he would have lost a lot of blood. Once hit by the blood god puppet, no matter what kind of creature it was, its blood would immediately rush out and become the blood god puppet's food. Moreover, there was a certain energy conversion effect, allowing the blood god puppet's owner to replenish their own energy. That was to make up for it in battle. With this, the owner of the blood god puppet would become stronger and stronger. Therefore, in a battle with Christie, as long as one was hit by her body, the battle was already doomed. Fortunately, although Kamal was careless, his reaction was still very fast. That was why he didn't let his precious angel blood be sucked away by Christie. This was the first time they collided. It was the same for Chi Yu's side. When the charm angel Hania rushed in front of him, Chi Yu only made a single movement: swing his sword. Slash. The huge Xianyuan sword left a golden afterimage in the air and directly slashed towards Hania. At this moment, Hania had already raised the holy sword in her hand. As both of them were about to come into contact, Hania's eyes revealed a trace of disdain. She paused for a moment and accelerated towards Chi Yu. Don't underestimate that momentary pause, this pause. She dodged the Xianyuan sword's slash and Hania revealed a smile. Chi Yu's attack was obviously a classic move. As one of the archangels, how could he not take advantage of such a huge flaw? However, Hania's smile didn't last for long, because he suddenly realized that even though the Xianyuan sword had slashed forward, a substantial energy had already arrived before him. However, Hania still had some wishful thinking. After all, an energy attack wasn't as powerful as a solid energy attack. As long as he could break this energy attack, there would be enough time for him to severely injure Chi Yu. Hania was the first person to face the Xianyuan sword today. If he knew the terrifying demon king Matawikia, he definitely wouldn't have made this choice. Of course, he did know him, but how could he be related to the terrifying demon king Matawikia? The holy sword went up to meet the golden sword light that flickered with starlight. An ear-piercing shriek rang out from the place where the holy sword and the sword gleam collided. There was only one thought in Chi Yu's mind. This birdman must be crazy. He still dared to look at me with disdain and collide head-on with the Xianyuan sword. He really had guts. The ear-piercing shriek made the law angel's expression change. The holy sword in his hand instantly pointed in Chi Yu's direction. With a soft clang, the charm angel Hania's holy sword broke into two. The golden sword gleam was already in front of him. How could Hania have imagined that the attack of the Xianyuan sword would be so overbearing? For a moment, he had already lost the opportunity to dodge. At this moment, the golden sword gleam that was charging forward suddenly stopped. The surrounding air seemed to distort as if it was caught in between. Hania took this opportunity to turn his body and dodge to the side. However, it was easier said than done to restrict the sword gleam of the Xianyuan sword with the air. The pause lasted for less than the blink of an eye. The golden sword gleam had already floated out once again. Hania groaned miserably. The 6 wings on his back had already been reduced to 5. Golden blood and pure white feathers scattered in the air. Kamar was in a better state compared to him. This 6-winged seraph had already become a 5-winged seraph. He looked like a chicken that had part of its tail cut off. Chi Yu was not wrong to call him a birdman. Chi Yu naturally would not let go of such an opportunity. The downward slash of the Xianyuan sword would definitely be deflected. Since the full force of the sword had already taken effect, he naturally had to follow up with another attack. As long as he could destroy an archangel, it would be hard to say who would win today's battle. The charm angel Hania had one of his wings chopped off, and his body instantly became sluggish. Just like how blood was the source of a vampire's charm, the wings on the back of an angel were also the source of their energy. Having one of his wings chopped off was already a considerable injury to the seraph. As his energy was instantly reduced by 1/6, coupled with the pain in his body, it was impossible for Hania to dodge Chi Yu's attack. God said that there are laws in heaven and earth. Everything is controlled by God. A calm but strange voice rang out the moment Chi Yu chopped off one of Hania's wings, and just as Chi Yu swung his sword a second time. Seeing that the sword was about to hit Hania, Chi Yu suddenly felt the air around him solidify. It was an instant of solidification, and the air seemed to become solid, pressing down on his body from all directions. His lightning speed seemed to be greatly restricted in an instant. The Xianyuan sword remained in its original form, unable to rise any further. Hania had already woken up from the pain. Enduring the injuries on his body, he used holy light to prevent the blood from disappearing. In a flash, he had already retreated tens of meters away. Hania's originally gentle gaze was now filled with anger. He retreated and advanced again, golden light condensing in front of him into the same form as his own body. It was the same skill that Raphael used to injure Ming-Ming, the angel's true body. Taking advantage of Qi Yu's delay, Hania disregarded his own injuries. Golden light converged towards his body from all directions, and in the blink of an eye, his body was dyed pure gold. The golden light gradually separated from his body, fusing with the same light and shadow in front of him. In an instant, it had already transformed into a lightning-fast speed and charged towards Qi Yu. "Appear," Qi Yu bellowed. The patterns of the sun, moon and stars on the Xianyuan sword lit up at the same time, the sharp energy condensing into a large sword light, forcibly breaking through the suppression of the Angel of Law Julier. Qi Yu raised the black sword and swung it horizontally. Army. Using Kiran's mantra, he instantly poured his own energy into the Xianyuan sword. Qi Yu was not Ming-Ming. As Kiran, his strength was much stronger than Ming-Ming's, especially after reaching the level of 7 clouds. Coupled with the Xianyuan sword in his hand, his overall strength had surpassed any fallen angel that had appeared so far. The Xianyuan sword drew a golden arc of light, slashing horizontally in the shape of a fan. Qi Yu's eyes lit up. At this moment, his right arm had turned completely golden. At the same time, the surging emotions in his eyes also calmed down, entering the state of God and sword as one. He was the sword, and the sword was him. His eternally ice-cold eyes stared deeply at the illusion of the angel in front of him. The dazzling golden light caused the 3 angels, Qi Yu and Christie, to lose their vision at the same time. An enormous energy wave formed into a huge ball of light with the center of the collision. The ball of light enveloped Qi Yu's body and charm angel Hania at the same time. At this moment, the two's energy auras had completely disappeared as they were enveloped by the terrifying energy. The Angel of Law Julier's expression changed. He didn't rush into the huge energy ball of light, but retreated quickly under the impact of the energy shockwave produced by the collision. At the same time, he made all sorts of hand gestures in front of his chest like a butterfly. He spat out a difficult language that didn't belong to any country. Golden symbols gradually appeared around his body as he changed his hand gestures. At the same time, a golden hexagram lit up under his feet. As the collision between Qi Yu and Hania created a huge energy shockwave, the battle between Christie and the energy angel Kamal came to a temporary halt. The blazing angel and the purple-gold blood emperor panted violently at the same time, quickly adjusting their physical conditions. On the ground, the last Vatican expert who was lucky enough to survive looked at the battle in the sky and couldn't help but feel a strong sense of horror. Although he knew that the Zodiac Guardian warriors led by Qi Yu were extremely powerful, he didn't know that Qi Yu could actually be this powerful. The 4 cardinals had summoned 4 archangels, but now that one of them had been sacrificed, the remaining 3 didn't have the slightest advantage. Even a powerhouse like Inzaghi, who was injured by Klinsmann previously, didn't have the courage to rush up and help in the battle in the sky. That's right. This battle was no longer on the same level as the battle between the Vatican and the Dracula family. The huge golden ball of light hovered in midair for a few seconds, and this was the first time the battle had come to a standstill. Be it the Law Angel, the Energy Angel, or Christie, who was glowing in a purple-gold light, their eyes were completely focused on the ball of light that was flickering with surging energy. At their level, they could naturally tell that the energy contained within the seemingly small ball of light was definitely no less than a nuclear bomb. If it were to explode, even if it were in midair, the area of a few square kilometers would definitely be turned into ruins. A few seconds later, the golden ball of light did not explode. Instead, it strangely disappeared into thin air. Chi-Yu and Haniya's bodies once again appeared in midair, still in the same position as when they had attacked. However, a black hole with a diameter of roughly 10 centimeters had appeared between the two of them. Unexpectedly, the black hole had absorbed all of the golden light. Haniya's handsome face seemed to have an additional layer of deathly gray. From the feathers on his wings to every inch of his skin, he was trembling constantly. There was no more energy condensing from the remaining 5 wings on his back. His body was on the verge of destruction. His azure eyes, which were previously shining with divine light, had now turned into a grayish white. Even maintaining his body floating in the air had become a difficult task. Perhaps this was the first time since the birth of the charm angel Haniya. He had never felt this weak before. Even though this was only a clone in the human world, he was still filled with rage. But what was the use of rage in the face of absolute strength? Chi-Yu seemed to be in a much better state than Haniya. At least on the surface, he didn't look much different from before. However, the radiance on the Xianyuan sword in his hand had dimmed. The sword radiance that emanated from the sword blade had vanished. His long, black hair had turned silver-white and flickered in crystal-like radiance. His imposing aura fluctuated rhythmically with the undulation of his mental strength. The Xianyuan sword in his right hand pointed diagonally to the right. The golden radiance vanished, revealing the pitch-black blade. But even so, no one dared to underestimate the aura of a divine artifact. It was obvious who had won. If Chi-Yu had forced the Angel of Light Raphael to use sacrifice to defeat him, then the Angel of Charm Haniya had truly been defeated by his sword. From the start to the end of the battle, only a few breaths had passed. The two of them had not launched many attacks, but it had already decided the outcome of the battle. At their level, techniques had become secondary. How to make better use of one's abilities was the most important. Chi-Yu's body swayed slightly, and his originally calm body began to change. The black Kirin armor emerged from his skin, and in the blink of an eye, it had completely enveloped his body. The Kirin armor changed very quickly. In the blink of an eye, Chi-Yu's body began to swell. If the aura that Chi-Yu exuded before was like the Kunkang mountain range, then he was like the world's highest peak, Mount Everest. The towering aura caused the silver radiance in Chi-Yu's eyes to shine brightly again. A pair of black wings made of armor appeared on his back. These black wings were covered with a layer of golden radiance. By releasing the second stage of Kirin transformation, Chi-Yu had already used all his abilities, including the golden-winged eagle's soaring 90,000 miles leap. Chapter 203. Chi-Yu snorted in disdain. "Don't tell me you bastards from the heavens only know how to fight with your lives?" Haniya looked at him coldly. "Insulting the gods will be punished severely," Chi-Yu said indifferently, "but this punishment isn't something you can bring. So what if you fight with your life? Now that things have come to this, do you think I still care about anything?" The Xianyuan sword lit up once again, but this time, it was at the same time as Chi-Yu's body. It was no longer the fusion of sword and god, but the unity of man and nature. The final battle between Chi-Yu and Haniya was about to begin. This time, it was no longer a matter of victory or defeat, but a matter of life and death. The Angel of Law was still muttering his incantation, and the golden runes surrounding his body increased in number. At this moment, a loud roar rang out. The battle between Kamal and Christie had begun. 2 blood-red rays of light circled around a golden ray. Every time the energy collided, it would spread outwards. The purplish golden light and the holy golden light were constantly expanding. As the battle continued, both sides no longer held back and displayed their true power. Man and nature unity. This was the first move of the Xianyuan 8 techniques, and it was also the move that Chi-Yu was most familiar with. Ever since he reached the 7 cloud level, it was no longer as difficult for him to use the first move. Not only could he unleash the full power of the unity of heaven and man, but at the same time, Qi Yu's energy continued to rise. Qiren's source energy was constantly being converted by the thundercloud force into the Xianyuan sword. Every time it was condensed, the Xianyuan sword would let out a faint dragon roar. It was a sound of excitement, but also a sound of anticipation. As the most powerful offensive divine artifact, the Xianyuan sword was a battle-hungry weapon. Hania was the first to move. He burned his life force to condense the sacrifice energy. The sacrifice skill was undoubtedly Angel's Gate's strongest attack, but at the same time, it came with a huge price. Once the sacrifice skill was activated, there was no room for regret. When the energy was condensed to its peak, even if it was not released, it would still bring about destruction to oneself. At the same time, the sacrificial energy condensed would also gradually dissipate. As an archangel, Hania, of course, knew that he had to use all of his energy to attack. At this point, he could no longer care about anything else. The golden figure, or rather a ball of golden flames, carried the life of the charm angel, Hania, and raised its speed to the limit within a short distance. It had even reached the speed of light. In an instant, it had already charged towards Qi Yu. In truth, Hania wasn't the only one who had no choice. Qi Yu was in the same predicament. Although he was stronger than the charm angel before him, against Hania's sacrifice, all he could do was activate one with heaven and earth. Only the Xianyuan 8 laws could withstand the archangel's strongest attack at the cost of his life. The Xianyuan sword moved. Qi Yu's body also disappeared. The huge golden sword brought with it the sun, moon, and stars. It brought with it the mountains and rivers, completely integrated into one. It was thrown towards the golden flames. At this moment, the Angel of Law Uriel's incantation was finally completed. What exactly did such a profound incantation bring? Qi Yu had no time to think. When using one with heaven and earth, he had to completely integrate his mind with the Xianyuan sword. There was no time to think about other things. With Hania as the center, the golden runes were released into the surroundings, enveloping the entire battlefield. In an instant, it was like a gigantic cage, trapping the 3 archangels and Qi Yu Christi within. The huge golden sword pierced through the burning holy flames, and Hania's body completely disappeared. The burning holy flames scattered in all directions and disappeared in the blink of an eye. After returning to his original body, Qi Yu couldn't help but be surprised because the attack from Hania's sacrifice was far less powerful than he had imagined. Although the Xianyuan sword was affected to a certain extent, it wasn't as strong as Hania's previous attack. On the other hand, using one with heaven and earth consumed a lot of energy. What's going on? Could it be that the charm angel only has this much strength? Could it be that he had become weak because of the injuries he had suffered previously? No, that can't be the case. As the saying goes, a starving camel is still bigger than a horse. Even if he's weak, he's still an archangel with 6 wings. How can the energy obtained from sacrificing his life be weak? Filled with doubts, Qi Yu turned around gracefully in midair, and gazed at the golden flames that erupted from Hania. Just as he had expected, things were not that simple. Although the ball of golden flames had been destroyed by the Xianyuan sword, it did not dissipate. Instead, it turned into specks of golden light that scattered in all directions. At this moment, the Angel of Law had completed his incantation, and the specks of golden light fused with the surrounding golden light barrier. Immediately, the golden light barrier was no longer as solid as before. Instead, it became illusory, and layers of golden mist appeared in front of Qi Yu in a superimposed state. Christi let out a cry of surprise. There was a huge change in the previously evenly matched situation. The Angel of Energy, Kamar, was as though he had taken stimulant. The holy sword in his hand glowed brightly and struck Christi back. Although it didn't cause any damage to her body and didn't destroy the blood god puppet, The purplish gold energy around Kamar had shrunk significantly. The situation of the battle took a turn for the worse. There was a huge change in the situation. Chi-Yu panted slightly. It wasn't easy for him to defeat an archangel. Hania had vanished and his opponent had changed. The angel of law, Uriel, hovered before him calmly. Chi-Yu could see a trace of pride in his eyes that flickered with a golden luster. Domain. The golden radiance must be a domain. But what kind of domain is it exactly? Chi-Yu didn't feel any restrictions on his body. Even though he had consumed a lot of his energy by using the unity of heaven and man, he still had about 40% of his remaining energy. Even though he might not be able to defeat the other angel, at least he still had some strength left. But in Uriel's eyes, he seemed to see that Uriel had already revealed the attitude of a victor. And all of this must have something to do with the surrounding domain. You're very powerful. I haven't seen such a powerful being among the humans for a long time. Uriel's voice was as pleasant as ever. At this moment, the radiance in his eyes had changed a lot and he had regained his calmness. What kind of enemy is the most terrifying? Is it anger? Is it a complete outburst? No, it's none of these. The most terrifying enemy is calmness. Only this kind of enemy who doesn't show his emotions on his face possesses even more terrifying power. No one wanted to feel this unfathomable feeling. Even Chi-Yu felt the same way. Why can't humans be powerful? Besides, do you really think I'm just a human? Chi-Yu retorted. He naturally hoped to stall for time. He knew that energy recovery was one of his greatest guarantees. As long as he had enough time, he could even restore his power to its peak state. As he spoke, Chi-Yu had already begun to use Kiran's ascending cloud technique in an attempt to condense the energy molecules in the air. However, when he began to condense the energy in the surroundings, Chi-Yu's heart sank. He was shocked to find that everything seemed to have turned into a vacuum. There were no energy molecules of any attribute. This was the first time Chi-Yu had encountered such a situation. Even in Hell City, there was dark energy for him to convert. Even if it took a longer time to recover. There were side effects, but it was still much better than this situation where he couldn't absorb anything. Don't waste your energy, Julian said. It's useless. You won't be able to absorb any energy to replenish yourself in my domain. Wasting time will only worsen your injuries. I think, at this time, you should be able to focus your energy on healing, right? Can you tell me what kind of domain this is? From the looks of it, you should already have the confidence to win. Chi-Yu took a deep breath and tried his best to calm himself down. Although the energy in the area was like a vacuum, it strangely didn't affect breathing. Julier smiled elegantly and said, "Of course. Haven't you noticed? After the three angels appeared, neither Hania nor Kamal used their domains. Do you know why?" Chi-Yu looked at him strangely. "Is it because of you?" Uriel clapped his hands and said, "You're a smart man indeed. That's right, it's because of me. Although I'm not the strongest among the 6 archangels, I'm the best at using domains. Even the head of the archangels, the battle angel Michael, can't compare to my domain. So, as long as I'm around, the other archangels won't use their domains to waste their energy. They only need to fight, and I'll use the domains they need to support them. However, I didn't expect you to be this strong. My domain is actually ineffective against you." Chi-Yu asked, "The domain that restricted my body?" Uriel nodded and said, "That's right. My law-directional domain is invisible and can control the enemy's body under any circumstances. If the enemy is too weak, I can even use this domain to make the enemy fight for me. Don't you think it's amazing?" Chi-Yu snorted. "I don't think it's amazing. I only know that in front of my Xianyuan sword, your domain is useless." Uriel said, "Indeed. No, the sword in his hand should be a divine weapon. Its attack power is the strongest I've ever seen. It can actually use its own sharpness to forcibly destroy my domain. This is the first time I've seen such a weapon. Without it, you might not be able to defeat Hania with the help of my domain. The result is already out. What's the point of saying all this? What's your domain now? It seems like you're more confident in it than any other domain. Uriel said, of course. Because this is my strongest domain, and it can also be said to be my life domain. As long as this domain is displayed, no one has ever been able to rush out. You won't be an exception. Chiyu smiled. Haven't you heard that miracles are created by people? However, when you displayed this domain just now, you seem to have received help from Hania. Uriel said, at this stage of the battle, we no longer have any contempt for you. In order to smoothly achieve the final victory, we have no choice but to make some sacrifices. In this world, we're just clones of the main body, and we only have 1/3 of our true strength. 1/3 of our strength is not enough for me to display my life domain. Therefore, I need Hania's help. Even if he doesn't use his sacrifice skill to help me, he has already lost the ability to fight in front of you. Voluntarily sacrificing yourself to help your partner. Looks like I've still underestimated you bastards. Chiyu laughed mockingly. Julier was not angered by the mockery in Chiyu's words. Instead, he calmly said, this domain of mine is called the Absolute Law. In this domain, I am the master of everything. It's not something that can be changed by human consciousness. Although your divine weapon is powerful and even has a certain restraining effect on domains, it has no effect in my Absolute Law domain. Because what you're about to face is an irresistible force. Chiyu raised the Xianyuan sword in his hand slowly. Let's see if your domain is stronger or if my sword is sharper. Uriel smiled faintly and said, then go ahead and try. Domain lock. Following his soft shout, Chiyu had already lost sight of Uriel. At this moment, Christie suddenly let out a blood-curdling scream. Her body had already been encircled by a circle of golden sword radiance. Originally, she was only facing one energy angel, but now there were 3 more energy angels by her side. 4 archangels surrounded her in the middle. In just a single exchange, Christie's body had gained 3 new wounds. The radiance of the blood god puppet in her hand had clearly dimmed. What kind of strength is this? 1 into 4? Chiyu was startled. Now that Uriel had disappeared, saving Christie was naturally the top priority. Without any hesitation, he pounced toward Christie. Klinsmann had already passed away. Whether it was from Klinsmann's or Su Qing's perspective, Chiyu would not allow anyone to hurt her. The golden mist floated. As soon as Chiyu dashed out, the surroundings changed again. Christie disappeared, and so did the energy angel Kamar. In the entire space, only the golden mist existed. Chiyu's body tensed up. He suddenly realized that the golden energy had engulfed his body and he couldn't move at all. Even his right arm that was holding the Xianyuan sword was completely locked by the golden energy. When he looked at his situation, he couldn't help but turn pale with fright because he realized that he was being held in the hands of a gigantic angel. The surrounding golden energy was actually just one of its hands, and this angel was Uriel. The energy that Uriel's gigantic body emitted could no longer be described as terrifying. In his grasp, Chiyu couldn't break free even if he unleashed all his energy. The power of the domain. This was the power of his life domain. Uriel said calmly, "Stop struggling. It's useless. In my domain, I am the most powerful ruler. I can make myself possess boundless energy, and no one can resist me." Although Chiyu was caught by him, his emotions were nostalgic and he could remain calm. In this situation, calmness was the best choice. Looking at Uriel, he said disdainfully, "If that's the case, won't you be the leader of the archangels? Perhaps you can even become the so-called Emperor of Heaven. Since you're invincible, why are you still an ordinary archangel?" Uriel's expression changed slightly. "That's because I'm the Angel of Law. Before I use my domain, I'm the weakest among all the archangels. However, once my domain succeeds, I can be said to be the most powerful one." Didn't you realize that when I use my domain, I can be attacked at will? At that time, as long as anyone attacks me, my domain will be interrupted. Unfortunately, you won't have the time to do that. My domain has already been formed with Hania's help. In this situation, you no longer have any chance. Chi-Yu said, in this world, nothing is absolute. I believe that no matter how powerful your domain is, it will still have flaws. For example, with your own energy, how long can you maintain this domain? This time, Uriel's expression really changed. Just as Chi-Yu had said, his absolute law domain was the most powerful among all the archangels. But at the same time, this domain also consumed the most energy. Even in his perfect state, he could only maintain this domain for about 5 minutes. After coming to the human world, he only had 1/3 of his energy, which was not enough to display the absolute law domain. Therefore, he could only rely on the energy that Hania had injected into him after sacrificing her ability to complete this domain. However, he could only maintain it for 2 minutes. Chi-Yu's words made Uriel feel a sense of crisis. He subconsciously tightened his grip on Chi-Yu, and the massive energy was clearly going to crush Chi-Yu. The Xianyuan sword vanished and merged back into Chi-Yu's body. Even though 2 minutes wasn't long, under his control, he could make these 2 minutes extremely long in his domain. He thought that it was enough to deal with Chi-Yu and Christie. However, he had underestimated the Xianyuan sword and Chi-Yu. Even though the Xianyuan sword could unleash its most powerful attack when it was in its original form, even though it had fused with Chi-Yu, the sharp energy was still present. When Julier increased the force in his hand, wanting to completely destroy Chi-Yu, Chi-Yu used the Xianyuan divine sword that had fused with him to make his aura incomparably sharp. He forcefully pushed the giant palm away a little, and his body rapidly spun like a giant spinning top as he rushed out of Julier's hand. Chi-Yu's aura stagnated all of a sudden. Even though he broke free from Uriel's grasp, his energy had become extremely weak. He had fought 3 archangels one after another. On the other hand, it could also be said that Uriel had fused with Hania's power. In terms of overall strength, he had exceeded his peak state. Moreover, he had the insane domain of time. Even though Chi-Yu broke free from Uriel's grasp, he knew that his defeat was irreversible. As expected, Uriel was startled after Chi-Yu broke free from his grasp. However, he reacted immediately. The surrounding space froze instantly, and the entire space turned solid in an instant. Chi-Yu couldn't break free at all. Uriel's enormous palm slammed down on Chi-Yu's head without any resistance. While Chi-Yu was in a crisis, Christie wasn't any better. Under the effect of the absolute law domain, the energy angel Kamal had split into 4 and each possessed 80% of the original's attack power. Although it was only for a few breaths, Christie was already resisting with all her might. However, her body was also covered in countless wounds. At this moment, 4 holy swords were pointed at 4 vital points on her body. Her blood god puppet had just been blocked by Kamar's energy and was about to be destroyed by the energy angel in front of her. She didn't even have the chance to dodge. The heavy injuries on her body and the loss of blood left her severely injured. Just as she was about to be destroyed, the space froze all of a sudden. Not only did Chi-Yu freeze, but the 4 bodies of Kamal and Christie were also completely restricted. At that moment, the nearest holy sword had come into contact with Christie's skin. The purplish-golden radiance in Christie's eyes had become extremely dim. From where she stood, she could see Uriel's enormous fist smashing down on Chi-Yu's body. Christie couldn't move. Kamal couldn't move either. But would Chi-Yu not be able to move? Indeed, the space that suddenly turned solid restricted his movement. However, this didn't mean that he couldn't move. At least, under the effect of the Xianyuan sword, this wasn't absolute. Feeling helpless, Chi-Yu could only release the last of his energy. The sharp, pitch-black sword shredded the solid space around him, allowing Chi-Yu to escape from Uriel's grasp. Of course, Uriel also saw the situation on Christie and Kamal's side. However, he was clear that the most important thing was to destroy this man. As long as he killed him, the heavily injured Christie wouldn't be a threat at all. Therefore, he didn't remove his control over the space. Instead, he moved his enormous body as fast as possible and launched a torrential barrage of attacks at Chi-Yu. Although Chi-Yu could barely move in this solid space with the help of the Xianyuan sword, his movement speed was immeasurably slower than usual. Moreover, Uriel's body was so huge that his attack range was extremely wide. There were a few times when his attacks brushed past Chi-Yu's body. Feeling helpless, Chi-Yu could only ignite Kirin's red. In an instant, the red radiance shone brightly and the temperature of the entire space became much hotter. With a loud boom, Chi-Yu's speed was inevitably restricted when he released the Qilin Scarlet. Taking advantage of this moment, he was heavily slapped by Urier's palm. If it weren't for the sharpness of the Xianyuan sword, which allowed his body to barely traverse the space after being struck, perhaps the massive energy would have crushed his body. Moreover, the high heat produced by Kirin's red caused Uriel's palm to feel pain. Subconsciously, he felt that the strength of his attack was reduced, which allowed Chi-Yu to escape from the gates of hell. But even so, Kirin's armor and Kirin's red weren't enough to offset all the attacks. Chi-Yu spat out blood and his face turned pale. However, Chi-Yu didn't dare to stop. Even though his internal organs were burning, he didn't dare to stop at all because stopping would mean certain death. At least there would be a chance if he struggled. He could not even use the Xianyuan sword, because as long as he left the Xianyuan sword, his body would immediately lose the ability to move, and he would immediately die at Uriel's hands. The situation had completely entered the most critical juncture. Christie was gravely injured and on the verge of losing consciousness. Even if she was in her peak condition, she wouldn't be of any help to Chi-Yu in the absolute law of space. As long as Chi-Yu died, Julier would remove the restriction on space materialization and Christie's body would definitely be pierced by the 4 holy swords. What should Chi-Yu do in this critical juncture? What else could he do? Chi-Yu didn't know either. However, he wasn't willing to be destroyed just like that. He wanted to struggle in the midst of destruction and search for any chance of survival. Forcefully pushing the last of his energy to the limit, Chi-Yu forcefully suppressed the injuries in his body and squeezed out the last bit of energy in his body. Raising his body's condition to the limit, he began to shuttle through the minor cultivation technique. It was impossible for him to move within a certain range. In this materialized space, he didn't have any speed to speak of. He would definitely die in Uriel's hands if he moved in a large range. Only by moving in a small range, and making use of the gaps in Uriel's massive body could he barely survive. As a matter of fact, Uriel was also in great pain. He knew that if he returned to his original form, he could instantly catch up to Chi-Yu with his speed. However, in this absolute law of space, as long as the ability was cast, it was irreversible. This was also one of the reasons why he didn't deactivate the materialized space. As soon as he deactivated the domain, he wasn't confident of winning against the powerful and tenacious Chi-Yu. Even if Christie was killed, all the efforts of the archangels would be in vain once Chi-Yu escaped. How could he watch this situation develop? Therefore, while continuing to use energy to extend the duration of the absolute law of space, he maintained his current state and tried his best to increase his speed in the materialized space to attack Chi-Yu. He could tell that Chi-Yu was already an arrow at the end of its flight after taking a hit from him. Is death coming? Chi-Yu's mind went blank. He even saw the Grim Reaper summoning him. Am I going to die here just like that? It wasn't that he was weak, but his opponent was simply too strong. After fighting the Dreadlord of Hell City and the Archangel before him, his confidence in himself was much lower than before. When Chi-Yu returned from the era of the ancient beasts, he was certain that there were very few people in this world who could be his match. Even Yamu, who had integrated Athena's bloodline, could only barely maintain a draw against him. However, in the 2 battles that took place after leaving Greece, Chiyu realized that he was wrong. If he really wanted to protect the East, his current strength was definitely not enough. This thought flashed in his mind and disappeared immediately. He clearly felt his body getting slower and slower. Chiyu knew that the final outcome wouldn't change even if he persisted. Even if the domain couldn't hold on any longer and disappeared, Christie would definitely die. What chance did he have against the attacks of the 2 archangels? You don't even have the confidence to win. Are you still worthy to be my master? Xuanyuan's furious voice sounded in Chiyu's mind. Chapter 204. This was the first time Chiyu called Xianyuan Hun Big Brother. Xianyuan Hun's mood eased a little after hearing his famous and somewhat relieved voice. Don't give up at any time. Even if it's a real death, you have to fight until the last moment of your life. Chiyu, let me end today's situation. However, after this, I won't be able to help you for at least 100 days. I'll go into a deep sleep if I release too much energy. If possible, bring me back to the ancient beasts era. The energy there is much purer than in your era. Only there can I recover as soon as possible. Chiyu was stunned. Big brother Xianyuan, what are you doing? Do we still have a chance? Xianyuan's sword said proudly, I'm the world's #1 offensive artifact. What chance? I don't care. However, I can tell you what a real destructive ability is. Even if I can only exert 1% of its power, you'll see the true tyrannical side of Xianyuan's sword. Before Chiyu could understand what was going on, he suddenly felt his body solidify. A golden light broke away from his body. The Xianyuan sword had abandoned Chiyu's body, completely restricting him in this physical space. Seeing that the giant's big hand was about to hit him, Xianyuan's sword suddenly released a layer of strong golden light. Then, a layer of golden light flashed instantly, followed by a miserable groan from Uriel. His big hand was immediately bounced back. Although the huge hand contained an incomparably huge amount of energy, it was now dripping with blood. Facing the sharp edge of Xianyuan's sword, who could not be injured, Chiyu smiled slightly, and a faint light flashed in his eyes. In the depths of his heart, he had vaguely understood what Xianyuan Hun wanted to do. Xianyuan Hun lit up, and the sun, moon, and stars left the sword one by one, followed by the mountains and rivers. Everything around it seemed to have no effect on it. As soon as these 8 natural phenomena appeared, they dispersed into the surroundings, and the physical space did not have any effect on them. The Xianyuan sword let out a clear buzz, and the dragon-like sound caused the entire absolute law field to tremble. The huge sword began to change. Before Uriel could attack Chisu again, a circle of hundreds of Xianyuan swords appeared around him. Every Xianyuan sword looked real, and in an instant, they completely enveloped Chiyu. At this moment, the space that was enveloped by the absolute law field lit up, and it was as if they had arrived at another world. The originally golden space had a natural scene. The sun, moon, and spots of starlight appeared in midair at the same time. There was no strong energy wave, and the mountains and rivers surrounded them. The world began to distort, and the countless golden Xianyuan swords spread out in the blink of an eye. When the distance between them increased, these golden sword lights began to expand, and the originally 2-meter-long Xianyuan swords had become 10-meter-long giant swords. It was just like when Chiyu performed the unity of heaven and man. Even the tyrannical aura was exactly the same. There were hundreds of Xianyuan swords. There were also hundreds of unity of heaven and man. Chiyu was very clear about the power of the unity of heaven and man. Although he had already guessed what the Xianyuan sword was going to do, he could not help but tremble violently when he saw such a shocking scene in front of him. Yes, this was the true power of the Xianyuan sword. This was the true #1 offensive artifact in the world. This tyrannical aura was what the Xianyuan sword should have, and not everything that it had originally displayed. A huge light flashed in the air, and the light in Uriel's eyes had completely turned into horror. He had tried his best to raise the power of his domain to the limit, but the sword lights were not affected by him at all. They were still moving rhythmically on their own. He could not even feel what his extremely powerful domain could do. A huge golden light suddenly lit up in the center of all the Xianyuan swords. At that moment, a 100-meter-long Xianyuan sword appeared on the ground in the air, and this huge Xianyuan sword was deeply inserted into the ground. At the same time, all the Xianyuan swords were in the same situation. In an instant, the mountains, rivers, sun, moon, and stars were filled with powerful golden light. With the Xianyuan sword as the center, the formation of loss shall become the formation of gods. Feel its destructive power. Xianyuan Hun's cold voice rang out. Even Qi Yu didn't know if Xianyuan Hun's words were meant for him or Uriel. At this moment, Uriel finally reacted to the drastic change in front of him. In his opinion, all of this was caused by Qi Yu. Of course, he did not know how Qi Yu did it, but he was already filled with panic. Perhaps it was because he was escaping subconsciously, but he did not attack the Xianyuan sword. His huge body suddenly flew up, and a super holy sword that was dozens of meters long appeared in his hand. He directly slashed in the direction of Qi Yu. Qi Yu is right. You guys with wings are a bunch of birdmen. In front of the God Annihilation formation, aren't you just waiting to die? Xuanyuan's voice was filled with uncertainty, and it was accompanied by the buzzing sound of the many Xianyuan swords at the same time. Countless 10-meter-long Xianyuan swords moved at the same time. It was not the main Xianyuan sword that was inserted into the ground that moved, but the Xianyuan sword light that was split from the main body. However, even the sword light was in the same shape as the Xianyuan sword. Even if there was only one 10-meter-long sword, it was already shocking enough. Once there were hundreds or thousands of them, the effect would be to cover the sky. Everything in front of Uriel had turned completely golden. An extremely overbearing energy with countless sharpness appeared around him from every angle in the air. He did not even have the chance to use the sacrifice skill. The huge swords had already swept past him. Uriel's body froze in midair. There was no indignation in his eyes, only fear. Instant kill. Yes, that was an absolute instant kill. That was the Angel of Law Uriel, who was in the absolute law domain. Even if the other 5 archangels were here at the same time, they would definitely not be able to do the same thing. However, the Xianyuan sword had done it. In the God Annihilation formation, even gods would be destroyed, let alone an angel like him who was not a true god. The sound of glass shattering could be heard from all directions, and cracks gradually appeared on the absolute law domain. Soon after, when the cracks spread to every corner at an alarming speed, a crisp explosion sounded. Uriel's body, along with his domain, had been completely disintegrated into a molecular state. Not even a trace of energy was left. Uriel had never imagined that he would encounter such a devastating blow when he descended to the human world. Not only was his clone in the human world completely destroyed, but even his divine sense had been minced into pieces by the God Annihilation formation. Compared to the Angel of Flame Raphael and the Destiny of Charm Hania, who had used the sacrifice skill, he had undoubtedly suffered the most damage. A third of his divine sense had been destroyed, and it was not something that could be recovered in a short period of time. It was also not something that Uriel could recover on his own. Paul Gasol, who had transformed into Ulier, was now completely unconscious. He had not died. As the strongest among the red-clothed archbishops, even if Ulier had been killed, he was still the one who had summoned him. However, in the face of the God Annihilation formation, even he, who was outside, was greatly affected. Along with the other 2 red-cloaked archbishops, he lay in the forest a few miles away from the center and entered a deep coma. He fell into a deep coma. Of course, in the next moment, the 3 cardinals became 4. The radiance of the God Annihilation formation did not disappear because of Uriel's death. Instead, it became even stronger. That huge sword ray floated out like flowing mercury. In the face of the God Annihilation formation that was filled with the aura of a ruler, even the energy angel, who had regained his mobility, did not dare to move at all. He actually raised his energy to the limit as though he was committing suicide. Yes, he chose to self-destruct. However, Energy Angel Kamar's self-destruction did not produce any strong effects. It did not even hurt Christie, who was right next to him. Xianyuan's sword god appeared in every corner of his self-destruction range. The sharp energy completely minced the surging holy power produced by his self-destruction, leaving not even a trace. In fact, Energy Angel Kamar did not do this because he was scared silly. On the contrary, he was very smart. The aura that Uriel had expressed at the moment of his death had told him many things. In order not to have his divine sense destroyed like the law angel, he chose to do this. He didn't even think about whether he could destroy her or not. Angels were selfish too. Protecting oneself was the most important thing. Therefore, even though the energy from his self-destruction didn't produce any effects, he managed to escape the Xianyuan sword god's encirclement. Christie let out a groan. Even though she wasn't attacked, the terrifying aura emitted by Xianyuan's sword god made her feel terrible. Moreover, she had suffered severe injuries. Even though the Xianyuan sword god had no intention of hurting her, the sorrow she felt for Klinsmann's death erupted in the face of the powerful aura of Xianyuan's sword god. Her consciousness had left her body, but she still held the blood god puppet firmly with a stubborn smile on her face. The golden light didn't stop. Xianyuan Hun didn't care who you were. The unlucky chief judge, Inza, was still staring at everything in front of him. His body was swallowed up by the Xianyuan swords that poured down like a river. Not even a drop of blood was left. He disappeared from the world in the incomparably sharp light. Soon after, the last target of the god-killing formation was the last expert of the Vatican on the ground. The golden sword light had already filled the space between heaven and earth. Behind the veil, the expert of the Vatican in white revealed an intense fear of death in his eyes. "Don't!" Chiyu shouted. In fact, even he didn't know why he stopped the Xianyuan sword god's final attack. He just subconsciously felt that the person shouldn't have died. Or perhaps, he felt that there was a faint sense of familiarity in that person's aura. This feeling came from the scream she had screamed at herself. It had appeared when she was under the influence of the demonification. The golden Xianyuan sword almost brushed past the expert's head. She was only a hair's breadth away from death. The golden radiance of the sword condensed into one in the air and condensed towards the huge Xianyuan sword. When all the swords merged into one, the huge Xianyuan sword descended from the sky and pierced through Chi-Yu's head, disappearing in the blink of an eye. Everything was over, and everything returned to normal. Chi-Yu used his last bit of energy to barely catch Christie's body and landed on the ground. When he landed on the ground, he couldn't help but stagger. He couldn't even control his body with the remaining energy, and he fell to the ground. Christie also slid down from his side. She was still unconscious. The energy particles in the air fluctuated violently for a while before slowly dissipating. If it weren't for the corpses of the experts on the ground, it would have been as if the battle had never happened. The wind blew, and the forest next to it moved rhythmically. The Dracula castle stood there quietly. The experts of the Dracula family had only recovered from the devastating scene just now. However, none of them dared to approach Chi-Yu. The huge Xianyuan sword had left an indelible mark in their hearts. Why didn't you kill me?" The last expert of the Vatican asked Chi-Yu agitatedly. She actually spoke in the language of Yanhuang. Chi-Yu's gaze wavered slightly. "Because you're not filial, right?" The other party was silent for a while. Her eyes flickered slightly. "Perhaps. However, if you knew that all of this happened because of me, would you still choose not to kill me?" Her voice was very pleasant, but her emotions were obviously very intense. Chiyu looked at her calmly. I don't know. But if that's the case, I might change my choice. The woman from the Vatican laughed wildly. You're really powerful. You actually defeated the 4 cardinal of the Vatican. You almost single-handedly turned the tide. I don't understand how you did it, but I'm almost sure that even if the Pope was here, he might not be able to defeat you in your best state. However, it's not over yet. Hand over Yamu and I can let you go. Otherwise, you'll regret it. Chiyu snorted and hugged Christy tightly in his arms. Regret? There's no such word in my dictionary. If you have the ability, come and kill me. However, I have to remind you that you'll be the first to die. The woman from the Vatican was silent for a while. She lifted her foot as if she wanted to walk towards Chiyu. However, after hesitating for a while, she put her foot down again. She seemed very hesitant. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Chiyu began to crazily absorb the energy molecules in the air. He would not count on the Dracula family at all. Those people might not be able to pose a threat to the woman from the Vatican. He could only rely on his own strength. This was what Chiyu had always known. The woman smiled. I won't take the risk because I don't need to. However, you'd better make the right choice immediately. Otherwise, it's impossible for me to let you live even if I want to. Chiyu slowly raised his right arm. There's Kirin in the east. Kirin has arms that can break the sky. If you want to try, I can show you what Kirin's real strength is. The woman shook her head and said, I don't want to try, and I'm not confident that I can resist it. However, I can't, but it doesn't mean that others can't. That's right, I said that even the Pope might not be able to defeat you in your best state. However, in your current state, I'm afraid that the only thing you can rely on is that ultimate Kirin arm. Chiyu's heart skipped a beat. You know about the ultimate Kirin arm too? Who are you? The woman's voice suddenly became a little urgent. Quick, hand over Yamu and leave this place. Otherwise, it'll be too late. Seeing that you let me go just now, I don't want you to die. Chiyu shook his head firmly. I promised Yamu that I would protect her safety. Do you think that I'll go back on my promise because of my own safety? What's more, I really can't see how you can dominate my ultimate Qilin arm. The woman's breathing became even more urgent. Fool, you fool, can't you see? As soon as she said that, a vigorous voice sounded. Although the voice sounded very old, it was unusually deep, and the voice came from all directions. No one can leave this place. God said that destruction will be punished by the think tank. Your Excellency from the East, you will receive the most severe punishment. Chiyu's expression changed. You finally know what this woman in front of you is relying on. This sudden voice also brought with it an extremely strong and powerful pressure. Who can bring me so much pressure? From his voice, Chiyu could roughly guess who it was. Only he could make me lose the desire to resist. Pope. These 2 words came out of Chiyu's mouth with some difficulty. His expression had already become a little bitter. He even wondered if his luck was too good. In one day, he had actually faced the top experts of the Vatican. With the Pope's status, perhaps even the presidents of the various countries might not be able to meet him. That terrifying pressure, the way that the Pope spoke, made him believe that his judgment was correct. However, he really did not want to believe it. Yes, it was the Pope. He was wearing a white robe with a polygonal front. The crown of the church shone with a treasure light, and he held a long-handled scepter in his hand. The jewels on the scepter released a dazzling brilliance under the sunlight. It turned out that when the woman discovered that the 3 archangels seemed to be unable to defeat Chiyu, she had already sent a distress signal to the Pope. This time, in order to find Athena, the Pope knew that this was an important matter, so he came personally. However, there was obviously no need for him to deal with the Dracula family. Hence, as the Pope, he only stayed in St. Paulo's Cathedral and asked the 4 red-robed archbishops to come with him while he waited for news. It could be said that the Vatican was in the midst of a storm by robbing and killing Athena. If they succeeded, the mysterious woman's promise to the Vatican would be greatly beneficial to the Vatican's future development in the West. However, at the same time, if this operation failed and the Greek side launched a counterattack against the Vatican in the West, the damage to the Vatican, especially its reputation, would be immeasurable. Hence, in order to ensure the success of this operation, the Pope personally came to London. When he sensed the first archangel being summoned in St. Paolo's Cathedral, he was already filled with shock. He did not expect a dark creature like the Dracula family to be able to approach the 4 red-robed archbishops and summon an archangel. The subsequent battle caused the energy waves in the air to become too complicated. Even the Pope could not clearly sense what was happening here. However, just when he thought that the battle was about to end, the other 3 archangels were summoned at the same time. This caused the calm Pope to instantly become nervous. He could not help but wonder what kind of enemy could make the 4 red-robed archbishops go all out. Even the Pope himself could not pose such a threat to the 4 red-robed archbishops. The Pope did not have to wait for long before the mysterious woman called him. She contacted the Pope through a satellite phone and briefly informed him of the situation. After hearing this news, even the calm Pope could not sit still and immediately rushed over. Coincidentally, after Chi-Yu destroyed the 4 archangels, he was heavily injured and had lost more than 95% of his combat power. Without the Xianyuan sword, Xuanyuan's soul had already entered a deep sleep after the God Execution formation was cast. Hence, Chi-Yu could not summon the 4 swords of Xianyuan to fight. Even if he could still summon the Xianyuan sword, what else could he do with the depleted energy in his body? The Pope's appearance caused Chi-Yu and Christie, who had already escaped danger, to once again fall into the abyss. Looking at the calm expression on the Pope's face and the sparkling divine light in his eyes, Chi-Yu's changed expression gradually relaxed. He slowly closed his eyes. At this moment, he had completely forgotten about everything else. He was just thinking about whether or not he would be able to cause any harm to the Pope. "Your Excellency Pope Marty." The mysterious woman walked to the Pope's side. The Pope glanced at her, anger flashing in his eyes. "My dear lady, you have never told me that the Vatican is facing such a powerful enemy. If I'm not mistaken in my hunt, if this operation fails, I'll be the one to kill him. In that case, the Vatican has not only offended the Greek gods, but also the mysterious and powerful Eastern Guardian." The mysterious woman's breath stagnated. "I'm sorry, Your Excellency Pope. I didn't make it clear before. This time, the one protecting Yamu is the Zodiac King from the East. This is my oversight." Pope Marty said calmly, "Is it really just an oversight?" The mysterious woman sighed and said, "I'm sorry. I'm willing to apologize to the Vatican and Piao for this matter. Because I didn't expect the Zodiac King's strength to be so powerful. I also didn't expect him to obtain the legendary Eastern divine weapon, the Xianyuan sword. That's why this situation has happened. However, this also has something to do with the cardinals underestimating the enemy. If they had used their strongest power from the start, we might have succeeded by now. Isn't that right?" The Pope glanced at the mysterious woman. "Now is not the time to discuss this. Let's solve this matter first. After all, we have paid such a huge price. This operation must succeed." He slowly raised his hand. The Pope's gaze had already fallen on Chi-Yu. At this time, Chi-Yu was desperately condensing his energy. He had no hope of survival. However, at this time, he had already begun to mobilize the power of the ultimate Kirin's arm. Even if he died, he had to create a chance for Yamu to survive. "Chi-Yu, don't." A somewhat weak voice came from the bottom of his heart. The voice came from the goddess of war and wisdom, Athena, who had been in a deep sleep. "Yamu, you're awake," Chi-Yu said excitedly. "Have you completely fused with a divine weapon? This guy in front of me is also the Vatican's Pope." Yamu said, The fusion is not complete. Chiyu, I saw everything that happened outside. You have suffered because of me. I'm sorry. Chiyu's heart sank when he heard her words. He smiled bitterly and said, Now is not the time to apologize. Let's deal with everything in front of us first. I won't hide it from you. Right now, the only attack I can use is the ultimate Qilin arm. Later, when the Pope attacks, I will immediately put Christie into the Kirin bead and activate the Kirin's arm. Don't worry. Without the Kirin's bloodline, even the most powerful person in this world cannot open the Kirin bead. When that time comes, I will try to throw the Kirin's pearl as far away as possible. I think after you finish fusing with the divine weapon, you will be able to come out by yourself. At that time, bring the Emperor Heart Snow Lotus King and Christie out. Help me send them to the east, to the Dragon Field courtyard in the capital. Chiyu. Yamu's voice was choked. The aura she emitted from the Kirin bead was filled with endless sorrow. Chiyu smiled indifferently. Everyone has to die. I just didn't think that I would die in the hands of a foreign country. Yamu, this is my last request to you. Even if they kill me, I have still completed the task of protecting you. Can you agree to my request? No, I won't agree. Yamu suddenly said emotionally. Chiyu was stunned to feel the strong fluctuation of her aura. Ever since he met Yamu, it was the first time he saw her so emotional. Yamu, what's wrong? Don't tell me you're not even willing to help me fulfill my last wish? I'm almost 80% sure that they won't be able to find you. As long as you can fuse with the divine weapon, you will definitely be able to take revenge in the future. Chiyu said anxiously. The Pope had already begun to gather energy. The Supreme Pontiff was, after all, the most powerful existence in the Vatican. As he raised his scepter, an enormous cloud of saint energy appeared in the air. His eyes flickered with a powerful divine light. He had already decided to destroy Chiyu. Wait! The mysterious woman suddenly stopped the Pope and said to Marty in a firm tone, You can't kill him. The Pope's pupils contracted slightly. He glanced at the corpses of the Vatican's experts on the ground. Didn't you see the sacrifice of these children of the Vatican? They gave up their precious lives for the Vatican and fought against God. They must receive the most severe punishment. You have to understand that those who were sacrificed today are the most outstanding talents of the Vatican. Even the 4 red-robed archbishops are unconscious. The Vatican has paid such a huge price. Are you going to go back on your word? The mysterious woman's eyes flashed. She hesitated and shook her head. No, of course not. Why would I change my mind? Your Highness, we haven't found Yamu yet. I'm afraid only this person knows where Yamu is. So, you can't kill him. The Pope furrowed his brows. Even so, I must capture him and make him lose all ability to resist. The mysterious woman sighed. However, she no longer had any reason to stop the Pope. She could not help but blame Chiyu. That idiot. Why didn't he do it just now? Now, even her last chance was gone. She knew that she could not stop Malty, and could only silently stand to the side. The saint energy in the air condensed once more, and the immense pressure made it difficult for Chiyu, who was on the ground, to breathe. Chi Xian, no. I can't let you sacrifice yourself for me anymore. I have a way that might help us get through this crisis. Yamu said to Chiyu anxiously. However, the strong sadness in her voice made Chiyu feel very depressed. A way? What else do you have now? Chiyu asked doubtfully. Yamu said, yes. There is a way that can help us get out of this crisis. As long as I can forcefully merge with Athena's artifact, I have the confidence to resist the Pope. However, I need your help. If you forcefully end it, will it affect your body? Chiyu asked worriedly. Chapter 205. Chiyu thought about it carefully and decided to agree with Yamu. After all, who would be willing to die if they could? Moreover, he still had many things to do in Yanhuang. The Zodiac Guardian warriors still needed his leadership. Since he had decided, he immediately said resolutely, How do you need me to help you? Tell me. Yama said, these days I can feel your aura in the Kirin bead. The natural energy in your body is of great help to me. Now, as long as you transfer this natural energy to me without reservation, I have the confidence to forcefully end the battle with the Athena divine treasure. Chiyu was stunned for a moment and said, it's not a problem to transfer the natural energy to you, but it takes time. Will the Pope wait for the energy transfer between us to complete? Yamu's tone relaxed a little, but her voice became much weaker. They're here. Guardian Athena's Zodiac guardians are here. I hope they can hold on for long enough. As soon as Yamu finished speaking, 6 rays of golden light shot from afar and collided with the ray of holy light that the Pope had just released. That ray of holy light was originally meant to grab Chiyu. Therefore, the intensity of the energy was not great. In the sudden collision, the 6 rays of golden light had the upper hand. Although the Pope activated his holy power in time, he still took a step back. Suddenly, 6 figures followed behind the 6 rays of golden light and suddenly appeared in front of Chiyu. They were the 6 Zodiac guardians led by Mephisto of the Libra constellation. Their timely arrival immediately brought a glimmer of hope to Chiyu. Mr. Chi, you leave first. We'll hold them here. Where's the young miss? Mephisto said without turning his head. Facing the Pope, even though there were 6 of them, they did not dare to let their guard down. Chiyu's eyes flashed and he said, you guys block him. Give me some time. Your young miss will be here soon. At that time, she will bring Athena divine treasure. In order not to let the Pope hear, he used some energy that he had painstakingly condensed to restrict his voice to only Mephisto's ears. Without hesitation, Mephisto led the other 5 Zodiac guardians towards the Pope. He said in a low voice, Pope, are you going to make an enemy out of us Greek guardians? Your action amounts to a declaration of war against Greece, and I hope you will give us a more satisfactory explanation. Before the Pope could speak, the mysterious woman said in disdain, power is the way to explain everything. Sir Marty, it has already happened. Kill them. Otherwise, as long as one of them leaves this place alive, you know the consequences. Hearing her words, Marty's gaze wavered slightly. The scepter in his hand slowly lit up. It's an honor to meet so many Zodiac guardians from Greece. The Vatican has not been in contact with Greece for a long time. Let me see how powerful the Zodiac guardians under Goddess Athena are. Mephisto and the other 5 Zodiac guardians' faces turned solemn. They did not speak again, but raised their right hands. Because they came in a hurry, they did not bring the box that belonged to their Zodiac guardian. Without the Zodiac guardian equipment, they could not unleash their full strength. Even if they brought their own Zodiac guardian equipment, could they defeat the Pope? At this moment, Chiyu had already started to transfer energy to Yamu without holding back. This was to allow Yamu to fuse with the divine weapon as soon as possible. Chiyu opened up his body and mind at the same time. At this moment, he could no longer hide anything from Yamu. The green nature energy even gave up on healing himself. Like a broken dam, it poured into the poisonous Kirin's pearl. With the guidance of his spiritual force, he successfully found Yamu, who was inside the Kirin's pearl. The nature energy directly enveloped her body. The battle had already begun. Rays of holy light continuously shot out from the scepter in the Pope's hand. Each ray of holy light contained strong energy wave. Mephisto and the other 5 Zodiac guardians each displayed their own powerful abilities and began a battle of life and death with the Pope. They did not dare to hold back at all. Every attack was an all-out attack. The Pope stood at the same place. His holy power seemed to be boundless. No matter how the 6 Zodiac guardians attacked, a ray of holy light met them and easily dissolved the energy of their attacks. On the surface, the Pope did not seem to be threatened at all. The mysterious woman watched the battle quietly. When she saw that the Kirin's pearl in front of Chi Yu's face had turned dark green, her expression suddenly changed. She said anxiously, Your Holiness, hurry up and defeat these Zodiac guardians. I'm afraid that person is communicating with Yamu. I can already feel Athena's aura. If Yamu really fuses with the divine weapon, then everything will become irreversible. A strange light flashed in Pope Marty's eyes. He slowly nodded. However, he still did not move. The holy light in his hand continued to be emitted at a higher frequency than before. This was because the 6 Zodiac Guardians, led by Mephisto, were attacking at a much faster frequency than before. They had reached the limit of what they could bear. Your Holiness, hurry up, otherwise it will be too late. The mysterious woman suddenly felt that an inexplicable crisis was approaching. She shouted impatiently. Pope Marty frowned and said, "Miss, you have to understand that the ones fighting me are the 6 Zodiac Guardians from Greece. Can't you see that they are attacking with all their strength? Under such an attack, how could I defeat them so easily? Although I'm God's spokesperson in the world, I'm not God." The mysterious woman felt that something was wrong. However, she did not know why. She coldly snorted and raised her right hand. A ray of blue light shot into the sky. She said indifferently, "It seems that at the last moment I can only rely on my own strength." The blue light pierced through the air and condensed into a blue ball of light in the air. When the ball of light rose to the highest point, layers of blue halos peeled off from the outer layer like braids, and then scattered in all directions. Although it was daytime, the blue light blossoming in the air was extremely obvious. Chi Yu continued to gather his nature energy into the Kirin's pearl. He could clearly feel a suction force coming from the Kirin's pearl. No matter how strong his transfer strength was, the suction force from his breasts was perfectly absorbed. He was already injured, and there was not much energy left in his body. In addition to the rapid release of nature energy, no matter how strong Chi Yu's mental strength was, he could not help but feel waves of weakness constantly attacking his brain. The battle between Pope Marty and the 6 Zodiac Guardians had already begun to blur in front of his eyes. There was even a situation where there were 2 of them. As the source of nature, he could be said to have the ability to be the closest to nature. However, no matter what kind of energy humans possessed, there was still a limit to it. Chi Yu was no exception. The natural energy existed in his body in a special form. It did not conflict with the thundercloud force. Instead, it condensed and compressed the thundercloud force. Otherwise, Chi Yu wouldn't have been able to fight the 4 archangels with his 7 cloud power. Nature energy could be said to be the purest and most peaceful energy, and anyone could absorb it. At this moment, as the nature energy continued to flow out, Chi Yu had a strange feeling. It was as if the Kirin bead was giving off a strange aura. There was a spiritual force guiding it into his body through the natural energy that he was injecting. He had formed a special connection with his body of the source of nature. However, he was unable to detect what this communication was in his current condition. However, he wasn't worried. In his mind, at least Yamu was his fiancée. In the face of danger, he chose to believe in his future wife. The blue flower in the sky gradually disappeared. 5 long whistles resounded in the air. Mephistopheles, the Libra constellation guardian, who was in the middle of battle, had a huge change in his expression. When his hands slowed down, he was almost hit by the holy light that the Pope had released. Hearing these 5 long whistles, the Pope couldn't help but be stunned. He looked to the side and glanced at the mysterious woman not far away. He frowned and slowed down his attacks, as if he was waiting for something. As the 5 long whistles became clearer, 5 figures appeared in front of everyone. As they got closer, the 5 figures were completely presented in front of everyone. The 6 constellation guardians' faces changed at the same time. They saw their own compatriots, and at the same time, they were the other 5 constellation guardians. The one flying at the front was the Scorpio constellation guardian Soso. Today, she was still wearing the skin-tight leather suit that completely revealed her figure. More than 70% of her skin was exposed. However, the seductive feeling in her eyes had completely disappeared. A strong killing intent and an unusual excitement were mixed on her beautiful face. Following closely behind Suso on both sides were the Aries constellation guardian Uranus, the Taurus constellation guardian Hydron, the Cancer constellation guardian Scythe, and the Virgo constellation guardian Geminis. The appearance of the other 5 constellation guardians at the same time was so sudden that the original 6 constellation guardians' faces completely changed. Mephistopheles shouted sternly, "Who allowed you to give up guarding the Parthian family's temple and come here? Don't you know that doing so is equivalent to betraying the goddess?" The Pope clasped his hands in front of his chest, and a circular arc of light suddenly shot out, causing the constellation guardians led by Mephistopheles to retreat. He also floated back and came to the mysterious woman's side, looking at Soso and the other 4 constellation guardians. Soso was clearly in front of the 5 who came later, and her eyes revealed a trace of coldness. "Why, only you can come here, why can't I?" "Mephistopheles, don't think that you can restrict the rest of us just because you are close to the lady. Don't forget, each of us is one of the constellation guardians. Everyone's status is equal. What authority do you have to order us?" Mephistopheles' originally calm gaze had now become fierce. "That's right, I indeed don't have the authority to order everyone, but don't forget, what should we, the constellation guardians, do? We only have one true mission, and that is to protect the goddess Athena. You left Parthenon without permission, and left the goddess palace without permission. You have already betrayed the goddess." Soso laughed coldly. "Is that really the case?" "That's right, we constellation guardians are indeed the most loyal protectors of the goddess Athena, but we should be protecting the true goddess Athena, not others." Mephistopheles' expression changed, and Ilias couldn't help but ask, "Soso, what do you mean?" Soso replied coldly, "Don't you understand what I mean? I only have one question, Mephistopheles. Is Yamu really our goddess Athena? I'm afraid she wasn't like this when she was born. You have kept this secret for so many years, shouldn't you let everyone know the truth?" Hearing Soso's words, Mephistopheles didn't get angry. He looked deeply at Soso and instead laughed. That calm smile made Soso's heart turn cold. "Mephistopheles, what are you laughing at?" Mephistopheles said indifferently, "Everything that the lady was worried about has finally happened. Do you think that saying this will change everyone's loyalty to the lady? I have already told the truth to Ilias and the others. You don't have to waste your time. No matter what happened in the past, the lady now has already inherited the divinity of the goddess Athena. What's the point of trying to sow discord?" Soso's gaze flickered. "Mephistopheles, you already knew that we..." Mephistopheles snorted and looked at the mysterious woman beside the Pope. "Gemini, all of this was planned by you, right? You have probably planned for many years for this day. However, would all of this really be of any use? If it wasn't because I couldn't bear to see you, you would have already left this world. Since everyone is here, why do you still need to hide?" The mysterious woman glanced at the Pope and slowly walked forward. She still didn't remove the veil on her face. Looks like this was all part of Yamu's plan. "But do you think you have the power to resist now? Even without His Highness the Pope's help, do you think you can beat us 6 against 6? As she spoke, she pointed at the boxes behind Soso and the others. Mephistopheles' expression changed slightly. "You still don't want to give up? Gemini, do you really want Greece to have an internal strife? We, the 12 constellation guardians, were born for the goddess Athena. Our mission is to defend the goddess' dignity, protect the goddess, and give up everything for the goddess. So many years have passed, and everything has become irreversible. Why are you still so stubborn?" The woman called Gemini snorted coldly. "It's not that I want an internal strife. I just want to get back what I deserve. As long as Yamu dies, I will naturally get back the divinity of the goddess Athena. The winner is king and the loser is the bandit. Mephistopheles, do you still understand?" They were both constellation guardians, and their numbers were the same. In terms of combat power, the six led by Soso and Gemini were not as strong as Mephistopheles' group of six. However, Soso and the other four Constellation Guardians were all equipped with Constellation Guardian equipment, and the advantage in equipment had tilted the scales of victory towards them. Mephistopheles sighed. In China there is a saying, "We were born from the same root, why are we in such a hurry to destroy each other?" Gemini's voice became full of resentment. You also know this saying? That's right, you did not kill me back then, but you brought me to the abyss of pain. Why did Yamu take away what should have belonged to me? Why is she the successor of the goddess Athena, while I became Gemini? All of this was caused by you. That's right, I have indeed planned for many years, waiting for this opportunity. It is easier said than done to not fuse with the divine weapon of Athena. You don't have to waste time. How can you compare to my understanding of the calamity of the goddess Athena? I will give you a chance, surrender to me, as long as I become the successor of the goddess Athena. You will still be the original constellation guardians. Mephistopheles shook his head. Gemini, you are too childish. Ever since Miss Yamu inherited the divinity of the goddess Athena, everything has become irreversible. Since you insist on doing this, you will be the one to regret it in the end. That's right, I admit that your understanding of the gifts of the goddess Athena is deeper than mine. That is because your aura can be summoned by the divine weapon, but compared to Miss, you are still lacking. Since this opportunity was specially prepared by Miss for you, do you really think that Miss did not have any preparations? Gemini seemed slightly uneasy, and slowly walked towards the direction of Mephistopheles' group of six. Since that is the case, then let me see what Yamu has prepared. Strength is everything that decides victory or defeat. At this point, do you think that I will still retreat and can retreat? The conversation between the two did not cause the mentality of the other constellation guardians to change. It was obvious that they already knew each other's secret. They were all constellation guardians, and the battle between them was about to happen. 5 rays of light shone from the backs of the constellation guardians, and a huge energy aura began to spread. Although the sun in the sky was still there, the light in the sky had clearly dimmed. Stars appeared in the sky, and the energy had begun to change. The Pope moved, and he followed behind Soso, while walking towards Mephistopheles' group of 6. Mephistopheles was very clear how powerful the Pope was. With him as the leader and the 6 constellation guardians, there was no longer any suspense in the battle. However, at this moment, Mephistopheles' expression was still calm, and he shouted loudly, "Miss, until now, have you still not made a decision? Everything in Greece needs you. For your mission, you have to give up something." Mephistopheles' words shocked everyone present, and the Gemini also stopped in their track. Just at this moment of mutual hostility, a mournful scream suddenly rang out. Chiyu, who had been quietly lying on the ground, suddenly trembled. His body floated up from the ground, and in that instant, his body turned a jade-like green. The energy aura that had originally disappeared instantly grew stronger, and green dots of light could clearly be seen surging towards his chest at the speed of light. Chiyu's eyes were filled with shock, and his face became even paler. The moment Mephistopheles finished speaking, the originally calm suction force of the Kirin orb suddenly increased by hundreds of times, and the huge suction force caused Chiyu's body to change violently. Then, his chest became numb, and every part of his body was no longer under his control. The huge energy aura did not belong to him, and even his own source of energy no longer belonged to him. It was filled with the incomparably sacred aura, and then the power of his source of energy was completely released. All the natural creatures within a radius of hundreds of square kilometers were sucked in by the huge energy produced by his chest, filtered through his body of the source of nature, and quickly rushed towards the Kirin orb. The continuous filtration and condensation of natural energy not only turned Chi Yu's body into a filter, but at the same time, His own life force was constantly being filtered and condensed by the natural energy. The last trace of thundercloud force in his body completely disappeared at the moment when the suction force suddenly increased, and he clearly and strangely felt that a part of his life force was leaving his body. Although there were no changes on the surface, his body was deteriorating rapidly, and the body that had been transformed by the source of nature was rapidly developing in the direction of exhaustion. Gemini was the first to react, and a strong sense of unease rose in her heart. Quick, do it! With her as the leader, the 6 constellation guardians rushed forward at the same time. After the Pope stopped moving forward, he did not move again because of Gemini and the 6 constellation guardians. He just stood there, quietly watching everything that was happening in front of him, his eyes flashing, as if he was thinking about something. Mephisto roared, and the 12 constellation guardians collided in the air. Mephisto faced Gemini, and the other 10 constellation guardians also faced their own opponent. At this moment, they were no longer partners, but enemies. Gemini had already seen the unease in Chi-Yu, and at the same time, she also felt the aura of goddess Athena. It was the energy of the artifact and the signs of the mutation of Athena's divinity that filled her with a sense of horror. She had completely suppressed the opponent. How could she still fail at the last step? So, she only had one goal, and that was to prevent what happened to Chi-Yu. And Mephisto's mission was exactly the opposite of hers. He and the other constellation guardians only had one goal, and that was to protect everything behind them, so that the ritual that he was looking forward to could be completed smoothly. Chi-Yu's body trembled violently like a sieve. Because of the loss of energy, the Kirin mutation on his body had already disappeared. But the hair that returned to black at this time, because of the continuous weakening of his body, it had actually turned gray, and it looked like it was filled with a deathly still aura. Even his eyes that were always shining had completely dimmed, turning into a dark gray. The Kirin tattoo on his chest was constantly in the process of disappearing, and even the muscles of his body were constantly shrinking. At this time, Chi-Yu's mind was completely blank. Of course, he knew where the suction force came from. But he really did not want to believe that at this moment it would actually become like this. Life, the woman in the Qilin bead, actually wanted his life. Body trembling, Chi-Yu's expression became very strange. At this time, he already understood the reason for the change in his body. In that unbelievable despair, he was smiling, but from the corner of his eyes, 2 lines of tears flowed down. The tears were pale red, looking very strange. The battle in the field brought about a huge energy fluctuation. From the beginning of the battle, Gemini's side had the absolute upper hand. However, as constellation guardians, even if Mephisto and the other 5 did not have the constellation guardian equipment, but in a battle of full strength, it was easier said than done for Gemini's side to win. Your Holiness, are you still not going to make a move? Don't forget our agreement. Gemini shouted angrily. Pope Marty waved the scepter in his hand toward the ground. His body slowly floated up, rising tens of meters above the ground, and said calmly, I only promised you to ask for the Dracula family's people, but now it's an internal struggle in Greece. As the head of the Western Vatican, I can't participate in it. I'm sorry, mysterious Miss Gemini. Gemini was enraged, her body instantly retreated, and a special electronic voice sounded from her mouth. Destroy. In her strange voice, the bodies of Mephisto and the other 5 trembled at the same time, and their minds instantly became blank. Their attacks naturally paused, and their bodies were bombarded back at the same time. Even Mephisto's eyes became a little dazed. In the midst of several loud noises, with the help of the Constellation Guardian equipment, Soso and the other 4 immediately closed in on the other 5, and Mephisto and the other 5 received varying degrees of injuries. Gemini's body instantly became illusory, turning into a phantom that flashed past the slightly sluggish Mephisto. The moment they passed, Mephisto felt his body tremble violently as if he had been electrocuted. It was not a physical attack, but a spiritual attack. Gemini's close combat ability was not considered strong, but on the spiritual level, the gap between her and the other constellation guardians was not just one level. The moment Gemini and Mephisto passed, the green light condensing around Chi Yu's body in the air disappeared. His jade-like body had turned golden, and a mournful voice spread from his chest. Sorry. 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 The female voice that sounded like a cuckoo crying blood was filled with boundless sorrow. The Chilan pearl that had already turned completely golden was releasing golden ripples. Seeing this scene, Gemini immediately became anxious. At the same time, she also understood where Chi Yu had hidden Yum. Her body that was rushing forward suddenly increased her speed by 30% in midair. She stretched out her right hand, and a sharp golden light was released from her spring-like fingers. At the same time, her huge spiritual power was forcibly condensed into the shape of a spear, and it spun like a whirlpool towards the Kirin bead. Boom! A loud sound exploded on Gemini's spiritual level. Her body that was rushing forward stopped in front of Chi Yu. Her whole body visibly trembled, and her speed suddenly decreased. A strong golden light with an incomparably holy aura came out from the Kirin bead. It was a spear. The tip of the spear was 3 feet long, and the golden sharpness was like a huge longsword. It went straight for Gemini's chest. Gemini was shocked. She was rushing forward, and the sudden attack in front of her caught her unprepared. She barely leaned her body to the right, and both her palms hit the side of the spear at the same time. The spear paused slightly, and an irresistible force immediately threw Gemini away. While her body was still flying in midair, Gemini shouted in shock, "No, impossible, how can it fuse so quickly?" Following the appearance of the golden spear, the golden light condensed in front of Chi Yu. When the golden figure gradually became clear, the golden light on her body gradually dimmed, revealing her original appearance. After revealing her human form, Chi Yu, who was behind her, slowly slid down from the sky. There was not a single trace of luster on his skin. As the golden light faded, his body had already become lifeless. Whether it was energy or the aura of life, it was completely stripped away. He did not die. His grayish-white eyes were filled with unwillingness and disbelief. Even now, he was not willing to believe that all of this was real. Perhaps it was because all of this happened too quickly. Chi Yu did not even have the time to feel resentment. However, everything that happened in front of him had already set off a monstrous wave in his heart. What did he do all of this for? Apart from his goal in coming to the West this time, the rest of his thoughts were on how to protect her. However, at the last moment, just when everything was about to end and there was hope for everything, he was the one who was destroyed. When the hope in his heart turned into despair, not only was Chi Yu's body about to die, but at the same time, his heart also completely fell into a dead silence. Chapter 206. The current Yamu was the real goddess Athena. The golden armor completely covered her delicate body. The armor was a perfect fit with her body, and not a single inch of her skin was exposed. Within the golden armor, only her beautiful face and long purple hair could be seen. Tears flowed down her beautiful face. Although the holy aura she exuded had even surpassed that of Pope Marty, Yamu was actually trembling slightly at this time, which destroyed her originally incomparably holy and noble appearance. The circular shield looked even more lustrous than when Shan and Chi Yu were fighting. The 12 constellation patterns on the surface of the shield appeared on the edges, as if they were alive, gently moving in a rhythmic manner. The original scepter had completely turned into a golden spear. The spear was like a sword, and the tip of the spear was like a pool of autumn water. Brilliance flowed on it, and even dust could not fall on it. Yamu's body had just stabilized. She did not chase after the mysterious Gemini girl who was forced back by the sharp spear. The spear in her hand was almost immediately inserted into the ground. Her delicate body brought along a golden afterimage as she instantly appeared beside Chi Yu and hugged his body that was falling from the sky. She tightly hugged his body from behind. Her eyes revealed not only sadness, but also deep despair. At this moment, although she had become the real goddess Athena, Yamu had never felt such pain in her life. Gemini nimbly flipped over on the ground and barely stood firm. Her chest was constantly moving up and down, and her eyes were full of resentment and anger. She did not look at Yamu, and her gaze was completely focused on Chi Yu. At this time, the constellation guardians that were previously fighting also stopped fighting, and all their gazes were focused on Chi Yu and Yamu. Mephistopheles' eyes revealed intense excitement, and the fat on his face trembled. "Miss, that's great, we finally succeeded." Yamu did not pay attention to him. At this time, in her eyes, there was only Chi Yu who had completely lost his life, and was on the verge of death. A huge amount of divine power rushed into Chi Yu's body without reservation, causing the surface of Chi Yu's skin to be dyed with a layer of lustrous golden light. The huge energy aura made Chi Yu seem to be a little better, but the deathly stillness in his eyes still did not change. I'm sorry, Chi Yu, Chi Yu." Yamu was already sobbing. Although her divine power could temporarily save Chi Yu's life, it was not of much use now. Chi Yu's life was destined to end soon. The origin of nature energy in his body had been completely absorbed by Yamu, and even the last of his life had entered Yamu's body along with the origin of nature. Although there were no fatal injuries on his body, at this time, all the functions of his body had been exhausted. Even Goddess Athena, Yamu had no way to save Chi Yu's life from the hands of the god of death. After all, her energy could not bring the dead back to life, so there was no such effect. Chi Yu also only had eyes for Yamu. He found that everything in front of him had become black and white. He could still barely hear Yamu's voice, but her beautiful face had long become blurry in his eyes. "Why? Let me know why?" Chi Yu's voice was very calm, and did not even sound weak, but it was extremely difficult for him to spit out every word. Yamu's tears flowed even more violently, dripping on Chi Yu's chest, wetting his clothes, but at this time, she could not say a word. She could only cry continuously, desperately using her divine power to maintain the last bit of Chi Yu's breath. She knew that once her divine power was withdrawn, then Chi Yu and his life would immediately disappear. "Chi Yu, you fool, you idiot, why? Why did you do so much for this woman, you bastard, why? Gemini suddenly rushed towards Yamu and Chi Yu like crazy. No one stopped her, because the constellation guardians knew that even if Yamu did not retaliate, Gemini would not be able to break her defense. Gemini rushed all the way to a meter in front of Chi Yu before stopping. "Chi Yu, aren't you very smart? Can't you see, all of this is a trap, this woman is just using you. And you are really foolishly being used by her. Not only did you destroy everything for me, you also destroyed everything for yourself." As she said that, she pulled down the veil on her face, revealing her true appearance. Even though Chi Yu was on the verge of death, when he saw the face of the woman in front of him, his body could not help but tremble violently, his emotions reaching an uncontrollable peak. He did not expect that the woman in front of him, who seemed to be the cause of all of this, was actually her. How could it be you? His vision was still blurry, but Chi Yu clearly recognized the woman in front of him, the woman he had once lived with. How could he forget that kind of beautiful and gentle face? "Big Sister Yun, how could it be you, why are you here, all of this, just..." Speaking until here, Chi Yu panted violently, but air no longer had any effect on his body. Yamu was so frightened that she sincerely increased the amount of energy she channeled into Chi Yu's body, barely keeping him alive. That's right, that mysterious woman who had brought experts from the church, the person who had planned the cloud killer rain eyes, was actually the first woman to enter Chi Yu's heart. She was also the first woman who had given him a good impression, the first woman who had given him the feeling that she was his home. She was Shin Yun, a woman that you would never have imagined. No wonder I was affected by your scream. That must be the psionic storm ability you mentioned, right? No wonder I always felt that your voice was so familiar. Big Sister Yun, I never thought that my opponent would be you. At this moment, Shin Yun and Yamu were both covered in tears, but her expression was much more complicated than Yamu's. The rain gear was just pure sadness, but her eyes were filled with unwillingness, resentment, sadness, and other complex emotions. Looking at Chiyu, she slowly raised her hand and pointed at Yamu. Why? Chiyu, do you want to know why? Fine, I'll tell you everything. I think, at this moment, I already understand that this was a trap I set up, and in the end, I was the one who suffered the consequences. Marty, isn't that so? You never had the sincerity to cooperate with me. In the distance the Pope still stood there, but his voice could be heard clearly by everyone present. Mysterious Miss Gemini, it seems that it's a little too late for you to guess it now. That's right, your promise to me back then was very tempting, but unfortunately, before you made your promise to me, I've already promised Miss Yamu. Do you think that if I were to choose who to cooperate with, I would choose you, or Miss Yamu, who has already inherited Athena's divinity? No matter what kind of background you have, my final choice will be everything. That's right, I sympathize with what you've encountered. Perhaps the heavens have treated you poorly, but unfortunately, as the leader of the Vatican, I have to make the right choice. As he spoke, Marty's body suddenly shone with a golden light, and in the next moment, he was already beside Yamu. The previously peaceful divine energy instantly increased by at least 5 times, and it completely locked onto Shin Yun's constellation guardian. The situation was completely set, and Yamu's goal had been achieved, so there was no need for him to hide anymore. Shin Yun looked at Marty with deep resentment. I admit that I've lost today. I lost because I was too confident. As she spoke, her gaze swept past Yamu and Marty's faces. But I didn't lose to you. Yamu, you have to admit that although this was a trap set by you, if it wasn't for Chiyu, the outcome today might not have been like this. Yamu took a deep breath, barely controlling her emotions, and said sadly, Sister, you also have to know that if it wasn't for Chiyu, I wouldn't have given you this chance. Shin Yun was stunned for a moment, and looked deeply into Yamu's eyes. Perhaps, if it wasn't for Chiyu, you might not have been so daring. I knew that this was a trap set by you, but I still dared to rush in because I couldn't wait, and I couldn't wait any longer. This was practically my only chance. The winner takes all. I lost, but did you win gloriously? You used Chiyu's only weakness, and that was his poor resistance to beautiful women. If it wasn't for you deceiving his feelings, would you have been able to obtain the final victory? Yamu slowly lowered her head, and looked at Chiyu in her arms, who was emitting an aura of death. Her tears actually turned golden. Chiyu's eyeballs could no longer move, be it his expression or his gaze, there were no fluctuations. He only listened quietly with the support of Yamu's divine power. The other emotions in Shin Yun's gaze also gradually weakened. Since things had already been decided, so what if she was resentful? She knew that she had completely lost the chance to become Athena. At this moment, all that was left in her eyes was sorrow. Chiyu, didn't you want to know the truth of the matter? Fine, I'll tell you now. Taking a deep breath, a faint light flashed in Chiyu's eyes. His current emotions were already indescribable, because he simply didn't know what he should be thinking. The deathly stillness in his heart caused his mind to go completely blank, and he could only quietly listen to Shin Yun's narration. Shin Yun wiped away the tears on his face, looked at Chiyu, and said, This matter started a long time ago. Around 19 years ago, an ordinary family in Greece gave birth to a pair of twins. They were a pair of girls. On that day, when they were born, the sky suddenly changed greatly. Golden light circulated, and the hospital room where their mother was in was completely enveloped by the golden light. However, under the enormous golden light, the doctors, nurses, and their parents who were present were completely swallowed, not even a speck of them was left behind. What was strange was that the two babies were not harmed in the slightest. However, because of the appearance of this golden light, they became lonely from the moment they were born. The symbol of Athens, Parthenon, underwent an abnormal change. The image of the guardian of the 12 constellations appeared in the temple, and the 12 constellations were abnormally clear, as if they were alive. From that moment on, those in power in Greece knew that a new generation of guardian of Greece had been born, and this generation's guardian was actually the symbol of Athens, the goddess of war and wisdom, Athena. At this point, Shin-yun paused and looked at Yumu. At this moment, Yumu had just raised her head, and their gazes met. When their gazes met, a strange feeling appeared. Shin-yun took a deep breath. This pair of twin girls who became lonely their entire lives are me and Yumu. When she said the last few words, she paused, and her tone was abnormally heavy. Chi-yu's body trembled slightly again, causing the divine light released by Yumu to fluctuate slightly. Yumu's heart tightened, and she hurriedly turned her gaze from Shin-yun to Chi-yu. She tried her best to control her divine power, and carefully maintained the last bit of aura on Chi-yu's body. Shin-yun continued, "Yes, we are the twin girls. I am the elder sister, and Yumu is my twin. Chi-yu, I know that you must be very curious right now. Since we are twin sisters, why do I not have any similarities with Yumu? Actually, this problem is not difficult to solve, because all along, the Shin-yun you know has never had his original appearance, and my original name, in Yen Huang language, should be Yu-yun." Yumu suddenly shouted agitatedly, "Don't say any more, don't say any more." Yu-yun was not affected by the sudden burst of light on her body, and a look of disdain appeared in his eyes. "Are you afraid? What else do you have to be afraid of now? The matter has already been decided, and so has our ending. Chi-yu is going to die, and he can no longer be a threat to you. You have already obtained what you wanted from him. Can't the blessed enclave let him know everything before he dies after deceiving his feelings? Using the words of Yen Huang, even if he dies, don't let him be a muddled ghost." Yumu was stunned for a moment, and her eyes, which had been swirling with tears, looked a little sluggish. The light flickered and she focused her gaze on Chi-yu's face again. She did not say anything, and even Pope Marty and the other constellation guardians present wanted to hear the whole story. Yu-yun continued, "When this pair of baby girls were born, they indeed received the blessings of the goddess of war and wisdom, Athena, and thus became the goddess inheritors, possessing the holy infant that could inherit the goddess' divine power. However, they also lost the person closest to them, and even their other relatives and friends did not know that they were still alive. Until today they are still orphans." At this point, regardless of whether it was Yu-yun or Yumu, the sorrow in their eyes deepened. There is only one goddess Athena's godly seat, so only one person can inherit it, and that person is me. I am the older sister, and I was born before Yumu, so goddess Athena's godly seat naturally chose me. I became the new generation's inheritor of goddess Athena, but everything changed because of one person, and that person is him. As she spoke, she suddenly raised her right hand, and pointed her index finger at Mephisto, the Libra constellation guardian beside her. Mephisto's body trembled, but he did not refute. He only sighed deeply and lowered his head. Yu-yun snorted coldly. "Why? Do you regret it now? But it's too late, Mephisto. If not for you, would I be like this today? Until now, I still do not understand why you sent me away, but did not kill me. If you had killed me directly, perhaps I would not have lived in hatred for so many years. But, do you know? I don't hate you, at least you preserved my life. I hate her, Yumu. She took away everything that should have belonged to me. Chi-yu, I'll show you my true colors now. Even if I die, I won't let you have any regrets." The right hand that was pointing at Mephisto swiped across her face. Like magic, a thin layer of thin film stuck to her slender little hand. The original Shen-yun had disappeared, and the one who appeared in front of everyone, other than the lack of a strong holy aura and the difference in the color of her hair, was exactly the same as Yamu. Yuyun said calmly, "This is my original appearance. As Yamu's twin sister, we look exactly the same, but the difference in our experiences is too great. From the moment she was born, she was everyone's darling, the inheritor of Athena. What about me? What am I? What have I experienced? Do you know?" A series of questions came out of Shen Yun's mouth. Her emotions were getting more and more agitated. "Mephisto sent me to the Shen family in the capital of the Yanhuang Republic. From that day onwards my appearance changed. I was no longer as beautiful as you, because I had to disappear. Whether it was my person or my appearance, I could only live as an ordinary girl in Yanhuang. Because of that, everything that you had was everything that I had lost. If not for that day, I would never have known that I was actually from Greece. Mephisto, this is also the second point that I have to thank you for. At least you gave me a reason to take revenge on her. Although I have already failed, I would rather this be the case than live my life in a muddle. On a day 10 years ago, because Goddess Athena's divinity was taken away, my consciousness changed. For some strange reason, I became the constellation guardian of the Gemini constellation. And because of this, I met you. Although you didn't tell me everything, because I seemed to be the constellation guardian of the Gemini constellation, you told me some simple things. Perhaps it was the will of the heavens. Although my strength continued to grow, the simple words you told me back then had already made me suspicious, and even made me feel resentful. That was why I never displayed my true strength in front of you. At the same time, since the age of 9, I have been quietly waiting for an opportunity to come. After nearly 7 years of investigation, I finally found out everything that happened back then. Perhaps you have already forgotten. At that time, when you secretly came to the Yanhuang Republic to look for me, because of my relationship with Yamu, and the plot was not good, you drank a little too much. That day you might have thought that you had fallen asleep, but as the constellation guardian of the Gemini constellation, the special skill of marriage is the soul storm, and it is far stronger than the soul storm that you know of. Therefore, on that day, through the control of your soul, I already knew everything, and from that day onwards, the seed of hatred has been buried in my heart." Mephisto sighed and said, "Miss Yuyun, you are right, that time was my mistake, but why do you have to be so stubborn? I really hope that you are not the constellation guardian of the Gemini constellation. If that was the case, you would not have to go through so many troubles, and you would still be a happy girl in the Shen family. Don't you think that that is the only way you can obtain true happiness? But as one of the signs of the Zodiac and the constellation guardian, we cannot do without you. If we lack one palace, even if we completely inherit the Luda of Goddess Athena, we will not be able to reach the peak of our strength. After all, from a certain point of view, we are a part of Goddess Athena. So, I have been thinking of ways to influence your feelings, to let you truly accept everything that is happening now. But, I gradually discovered the hatred and ambition in your heart, so, subconsciously, I was always on guard against you, and did not teach you the most correct cultivation method of the constellation guardian. But I did not expect that time when I was drunk, not only did you know everything, at the same time, it also gave you the true cultivation method, as well as the method to contact the other constellation guardians. I am afraid that it was also from that time onwards that you truly became stronger, and you really had the chance to contact the constellation guardians." Yuyun said, "That's right, it was from that time onwards that I had my own goal in life. I wanted to rely on my own strength to get back everything that I have. Living in the Shen family, other than working hard on my cultivation, I would search for records of the Greek gods. When I got to know Saw, my plan finally started to take shape, and it was also from that time onwards that my plan began to take shape. In these 2 years, I used my own identity and various methods to finally obtain the support of the 5 constellation guardians. Saw told me that the other 6 had already become the most loyal supporters of Yum. So, in order not to alert the enemy, I did not continue to do anything, and only waited for the opportunity to come. But I did not think that the opportunity would come so quickly. According to what I know, the divinity of Goddess Athena cannot be easily inherited. What Yamu inherited was only the basic abilities of the divinity. To truly possess the power of Goddess Athena's divinity, one must go through a long period of time, and even have a certain amount of luck. Otherwise, it is hard to say how much of Goddess Athena's power can be obtained. So, I have been waiting and training hard, but I did not think that the opportunity would come when I was not fully prepared. Mephistopheles sighed. Actually, this plan was decided not long ago when I discovered that you had unintentionally revealed your strength. When you first met me, you should not have revealed your overly strong spiritual power, and the information that you were familiar with the constellation guardians. At that time, I already felt that something was wrong, but I still held onto a glimmer of hope. After all, we are all constellation guardians of Goddess Athena. Only by working together can we become the most powerful guardian of Greece in history. We can protect Greece and our East. From that time, I began to pay attention. I knew that I could no longer hide anything from Miss, so I told Miss everything. Actually, Miss is the most innocent. But we also know that it is easier said than done to vent the hatred in your heart. So, since such a crisis has already appeared, we might as well trigger it. Using the opportunity of Mr. Chi Yu's arrival in Greece, we began to carry out the plan. Only by letting Miss truly become Goddess Athena could we make you lose hope, and thus recognize your current identity as the constellation guardian of Gemini. But I did not expect that Miss would actually fall in love with Mr. Chi. A strange light flashed in his eyes, and Yuyun said in a daze, "What did you say? Yamu actually fell in love with Chi Yu? I don't believe it. If a woman falls in love with a man, then why would she?" "Because I have to do this," Yamu shouted, her voice choked with sobs, and she could not control it at all. Yuyun looked at her hatefully and said disdainfully, "You can't do it, why can't you? Just because you are a virgin goddess? No, you chose to give up on Chi Yu for your current position, for your current power. That's right. In your heart, how can he be compared to your current position? In Greece, you are the supreme existence." Rain Eyes said mournfully, "Sister, I really had no choice but to roar. Everything you know is true. If I die, you can indeed obtain great power, and once again obtain Goddess Athena's divinity in my blood. But, if that is really the case, you will only obtain Goddess Athena's pseudo-divine power. Because Goddess Athena's divinity has long been fused with my body. Even if my blood can condense enough energy, it is not all. The world's calamity is about to happen. If it is only pseudo-divine power, you will not be able to lead the constellation guardians to protect Greece, to protect the West. Taking a step back, even if you can obtain everything I have, if you become Goddess Athena, it will inevitably lead to one less constellation guardian. Losing one constellation guardian will be a huge blow to us. That's right, I really like Chi Yu. Although Chi Yu looks ordinary, the aura in his eyes, the temperament he exudes, is completely different from what he shows on the surface. His attraction to me is indescribable. When I am with him, I can truly experience the happiness of being a woman. Only he would treat me like an ordinary girl. After countless struggles, I finally made up my mind. In the end, I still hurt Chi Yu, and let his life become the cornerstone for me to inherit Goddess Athena's divinity. That's right, I did obtain great power, but do you know how much I have to sacrifice to obtain this power? If it was the other way around, I would rather give all of Goddess Athena's divinity to you. I just want to be like you in the Yenwang Republic, an ordinary human being, and become his woman. That would be true happiness for me. But I can't, I really can't, because my life does not belong to me, but to the whole of Greece and even the whole West. So, in this situation, I can only do this, do you know? Yamu's voice became somewhat hysterical, and the golden light in her eyes fluctuated violently. Due to the influence of her emotions, the divine energy she transferred to Chi-Yu also changed, causing his aura to react strongly. Chi-Yu's body trembled, and he spat out a mouthful of black blood. For some reason, after spitting out this mouthful of blood, Chi-Yu became more clear-headed, and even everything in front of him became clearer. With a smile, a faint cold light appeared in Chi-Yu's eyes. Continue, Yamu, withdraw your divinity. Don't worry, before you tell me everything, I will not die, because I am not resigned to this. Now, his emotions were very calm. Listening to the twin sisters' narration, he had regained his power, and he was just a sacrifice in their power struggle. Yamu's body trembled. She could clearly feel a wave of energy coming from Chi-Yu's body, and this wave of energy came from his heart. When this wave of energy appeared, it was the demonic energy that had been fighting with Chi-Yu when he first arrived. When this energy appeared, Yamu could not help but be shocked. Could it be that he could continue to live? Yamu's shock only lasted for a moment, and she could clearly feel that the energy filled with the aura of death was quickly dissipating, and this energy only made Chi-Yu feel a little better. She understood that this was the phenomenon of the final radiance of the setting sun. Chapter 207. Chi-Yu's eyes revealed a faint glint. His gaze swept across Yamu's face and then Yuyun's face. Yuyun, your hair should have been dyed before, right? No matter how you want to deal with Yamu, it has nothing to do with me. However, why did you drag the Dracula family into this? Yuyun's laughter stopped, because tears were already flowing down her cheeks amidst her laughter. Chi-Yu, I'm sorry. I don't know what kind of feelings I have for you. However, I can tell you that you're the only man that I've ever fallen for in my life. Do you still remember what happened at the seaside? In the sea, you used your own strength to save me and Su Qing. At that time, my strength had already been raised to a certain level. However, under that kind of sudden attack, it was impossible for me to fight against that huge monster. You saved my life. I'm a girl, and even though I like women, especially Qing, you've left an indelible mark in my heart. There's a very special emotion about you that I'm infatuated with. Man, you're not pretentious at all. I like your powerful strength, and I've thought of using your strength to achieve my own goals, to deal with Yamu together. However, I can't do that. I'm different from Yamu. Ever since I found out about my birth, pain and hatred have been entangling my body and mind. Being with you is one of the few beautiful memories in my heart, and I don't want to destroy this kind of novel memory. Therefore, I can only bury my feelings for you in the bottom of my heart. If it wasn't for the fact that Goddess Athena must be a virgin to inherit the godly seat, I would have even thought of offering myself to you. I don't care about my chastity. I'm very, very tired. For the sake of the plan in my heart, I've put in so much effort for the only goal in my life. What I'm tired of is my heart. My heart has been touched more than once, and I've thought of giving up more than once. However, the hatred in my heart has forced me to persevere, and the hatred in my heart has kept me alive until now. There's one thing you must be clear about. It wasn't me who brought trouble to the Dracula family, it was you. If you didn't stop at the Dracula family, why would I point my target here? The one who really destroyed the Dracula family was the Holy See. They used me. This great supreme pontiff made use of my hatred towards Yamu. Anyway, to them, destroying the Dracula family would only bring them benefit. From the beginning to the end, His Holiness the Pope was only thinking about the benefit. However, he did not expect you to be so powerful that he could not even imagine it. For red-robed archbishops actually died at your hands. Your brilliance has already overshadowed everything in the Vatican. Chi-Yu, I didn't want to use you, and I didn't want you to get involved in the fight between me and Yamu. However, you came between us. I can't give up my only hope just because of your appearance. As for the rest, I'll let your beloved Rain Eyes tell you. I think it'll be clearer if she says it. After all, she's the one who arranged it all. Chi-Yu moved with difficulty. Lai Ji's gaze fell on Yamu. Say it, I'm waiting to hear it. Just like what Yun said, I hope to be a ghost who understands. The tears in Yamu's eyes paused for a moment. Do you really want to know? Chi-Yu looked at her calmly. What do you think? Miss, don't say it, Mephistopheles suddenly shouted. Mephistopheles suddenly shouted. He knew that if this matter came from Yu Mao's mouth, then the blow to her heart would never be able to make up for. Towards Chi-Yu, Yamu not only felt a deep sense of guilt, but also a deep love for him. However, she had to give up her feelings for Chi-Yu because of her responsibility. It was a huge blow to her to have her tell how she schemed against and destroyed the person she loved. Even though she had become the goddess Athena, her heart was still a human's heart. A faint light appeared in Yamu's eyes. She took a deep breath, and the light in her eyes paused on Mephisto's face. Let me say it. Since this matter was caused by me, let me tell the truth to Chi-Yu. This is the only thing I can do for him. At this point, she looked at Chi-Yu in her arms, lowered her head, and kissed his forehead gently. Although her whole body was covered with the goddess Athena's armor, the expression on her face at this time was like a wife looking at her husband. Her beautiful eyes were shining, and she smiled slightly. Chi-Yu, I know you hate me. Actually, do you know? Even I can't forgive myself. When I first met you in Yanhuang, and later in the fight for the giant beast relic, the impression you left on me was the word powerful. At the same time, I felt threatened by you. I knew that although the overall strength of the Zodiac Guardian warriors was not comparable to Greece at that time, sooner or later, your strength would rise to the point where you could compete with me, or even surpass me. Therefore, at that time, I only felt vigilant towards you. That's why I decided to be your guide and let you come to Greece. Only after a period of contact can I understand you better, and also understand the Guardians of the East. During the half a year of waiting, I could almost think of the problem between you and the Zodiac Guardian warriors every day. I was actually a little afraid of your arrival, but I was also looking forward to it. Finally, after waiting for a long time, you came. When I saw you for the second time, the feeling you gave me had changed a lot. The first time I saw you, the aura of a ruffian was very obvious. The second time I saw you, the aura of a ruffian was still there, but compared to the first time, you had a nobler aura. That wasn't a change in your aura, but from the inside out. It was also at that time that I thought of the plan and Mephisto's plan. Therefore, we had the battle in Parthenon. At the mention of home, Yamu slightly gasped for breath and adjusted the divine power that she had lost to Chi-Yu. Her eyes revealed a trace of strong light, and her hands were tightly pressed against Chi-Yu's chest and back. Even the shield of the goddess of victory in her hands was placed on the ground. There was a trace of a faint light in her eyes as she continued, "In that battle, what I discovered was not how strong your strength was. Your strength has indeed reached a level comparable to mine. I don't have the confidence to win in a real battle. At the same time, more importantly, I've discovered the power that I've been hoping to obtain the most from you. Under the effect of that power, I can definitely achieve a qualitative leap in a short period of time. Become the real goddess Athena, that is your natural power. Natural power is the most peaceful kind of energy. This kind of energy doesn't resist my divine power at all. It can be like glue, completely binding me and my divine power together, and completely fusing my energy with Athena's divine weapon. However, I also discovered that the natural power in your body is completely connected to your life aura. If I want to become the real goddess Athena under the effect of your natural power, then I must obtain all of your natural power, which is the source of your natural power. Therefore, when I complete the fusion, your life force will also be absorbed by me along with the natural source. Therefore, when I completed the fusion, your life force was also absorbed by me along with the origin of nature." There was a faint light in his eyes, and a trace of mockery appeared on Chi-Yu's deathly still face. There was a faint light in his eyes, and a trace of mockery appeared on Chi-Yu's deathly still face. Taking a deep breath, Yama lowered her head and said, "Yes, what I really covet is the power of your natural source. I have indeed lied to you. In order to become Goddess Athena and obtain the gift's recognition, I can only rely on the power of your natural source. Although I already knew that Sister Yuyun could bring me the greatest power, I didn't expect her to bring me so much power. I didn't expect her to be able to bring so much. I also didn't expect that you would actually go to the Dark Council. If she had demonstrated it to me 3 days ago, and if she could have happened a little later, then you wouldn't have died. In that case, you won't die, and I might be able to preserve a little bit of your life force. However, it's too late to say anything now. Your body has already reached such a state, and the natural source is actually showing signs of exhaustion. In order to be able to fuse with Goddess Athena's divine weapon at the last moment, I had no choice but to use my own divine power to completely explode the power of the natural source when you couldn't resist it. Then, I completely absorbed your life force, your energy, and your natural source into my own body, allowing Goddess Athena's divine weapon to completely fuse with it at the last moment. Only then did I manage to achieve the greatest goddess power in one go. The light shone, and a faint light appeared in Chi-Yu's eyes. I understand now. Your pursuit of power has caused you to give up everything. If my guess is correct, although you have been cultivating in my Kiran's pearl, you haven't fallen into a deep slumber. In fact, you haven't even completely lost your power. What you have shown me is only a facade. The reason why you didn't help me in my many battles was because you were waiting for an opportunity. You were waiting for me to weaken during the battle. Once my power was weakened to a certain extent, and I couldn't resist your power, you would immediately take action and strip away my natural source and life force. After the battle with the Covenant of Darkness, I was unconscious for a period of time. I'm afraid there were 2 reasons why you didn't take action then. One was that my body was still weak, and the other was because of the Xianyuan sword in my body. Just now, in order to defeat those birdmen, the Dark Soul used his own power to activate the Xianyuan sword's powerful attack, which gave you the best opportunity. So, you told me to use my natural source to help you speed up the fusion, so that you could connect with my natural source and destroy me without hesitation. Am I right? Yamu stared blankly at Chi-Yu. Yes, everything you said is correct. That's how I schemed against you, the only man who has ever entered my heart. I don't want to know what happened between you and Yuyun anymore. If I'm the only one who dies, I won't even hate you. Yuyun is right, I'm an idiot. Why would the heir to Goddess Athena fall in love with a ruffian like me? You said you fell in love with me? Even now, you still want to lie to me with such words? This was a trap from the start. You just wanted to make use of me. I'm such a joke. Goddess Athena, as one of the virgin goddesses, actually said that she wanted to be my fiancé, and I actually believed her. Yamu, if I was alone, I might even feel pity for you. But it's because of you and me that Klinsmann died. He's dead, and Ming Ming and Christy are also heavily injured. This makes me feel like I've turned into a demon. I no longer have any power. Let go of your hand. I don't want to have any contact with you anymore. You're so holy and pure, and I'm just a ruffian, a guy who can't walk when he sees a woman. How can I have physical contact with a goddess like you? Chi-Yu's defeated face was full of mockery. However, he wasn't mocking Yamu, but himself. Chi-Yu. Yamu hugged Chi-Yu's body tightly. Golden light was released from her body, and the 3 artifacts of Athena disappeared at the same time. Her graceful body was tightly attached to Chi-Yu's body. I don't expect your forgiveness. I, the 4 C's, want you to know that when everything is over, I'll go back to you. No matter where your soul is, I'll be by your side. If there's an afterlife, I'm willing to use my future eternity to repay my debt to you. Go, I don't want you to suffer any more pain. The hands that were infused with divine power turned into hugs. The golden light slowly spread, letting Chi-Yu's head rest on her bouncy breasts. Yama's expression was very calm, but her eyes were abnormally empty. Quietly waiting for that moment to come. Yanhuang Republic, Beijing. When Ting pushed open the door and walked into Snow Girl's room. After staying here for a long time, Snow Girl had decorated her room in elegant and cold colors, completely in line with her personality. "Mom, you're here." Snow Girl smiled and met Wen Ting's gaze. Wen Ting made her way over to the Snow Maiden and sat down beside her. She glanced at the laptop that the Snow Maiden had been staring at earlier and said with a concerned expression, "Don't work too hard. The Kirin Corporation has already been fully registered, and the warehouse and some of the preparatory work are almost complete as well. All that's left is to transport those fruits back to the ancient beast era. It's been less than 2 months. It's already very difficult to do this. I don't want my baby daughter to be tired. Otherwise, when Chi-Yu comes back, I won't be able to explain it to him." Snow Girl held Wen Ting's hand and showed a sweet smile on her pretty face. "How can that be? Even if I don't eat or sleep for a month, I won't have a problem. Mom, have you forgotten that I'm not a real human?" Wen Ting said, "I really didn't expect you to be so talented in business. Ryue only taught you some things and you could digest and absorb it in such a short time. It seems that I can only use the word genius to describe my baby daughter." Snow Girl said, "I just want to give Dad a surprise. I don't know when they'll come back." Speaking of this, Snow Girl's pretty face was obviously a little excited. Although Mo Dan was very rude to Chi-Yu, she didn't dare to delay after all. She immediately told Snow Girl and Wen Ting the news that Chi-Yu had rescued the Emperor Heart Snow Lotus King. The arrival of this news made Snow Girl excited for a whole day. She was now looking forward to the return of her 2 fathers. Her biological father was rescued. There was some inexplicable change in her mentality. Her feelings for Chi-Yu also quietly sublimated. Kirin Group had been basically established during this period of time. With Hai Ryue's actions, the early stage of Kirin Group's recruitment had been completed. The group's address had also been set in advance. The registered capital was 100 million yuan. With this huge capital, coupled with Ryue's operation methods, the whole method was already on the right track. Now they were waiting for Chi-Yu to come back and transport the fruits back. Then they could start shooting the advertisement with Xiao Lu, who had signed a contract. During this period of time, although Wen Ting and Snow Girl missed Chi-Yu very much, they still felt that time passed very quickly because they had things to do. Wen Ting's novel was not strong in management, but Snow Girl had become a rare genius. With the help of Hai Ryue, the 2 women had become the chairman and general manager of Kirin Group. They both knew Chi-Yu very well. They knew that the establishment of Kirin Group was a career that he had to have as a man. Therefore, in the early stage of preparation, they put all their energy into it. Wen Ting smiled and said, "It shouldn't be too long. Didn't Chi-Yu call? He said that he had to deal with something and would come back immediately." Snow Girl shook her head gently, and there was a worried look on her pretty face. "Mom, I don't know why, but I always have a feeling of uneasiness in my heart. It seems that Dad will be in danger." Wen Ting's face changed slightly and she comforted her. "It won't be. With Chi-Yu's strength, even if he encounters a strong opponent, at least it will not be a problem for him to protect himself. What's more, he is a person who is good at creating miracles. He has returned from the era of ancient beasts, and he has the sharpness of the Xianyuan sword. I'm afraid it will not be easy for anyone in the West to threaten his life." The Snow Lady nodded and said, "Let's hope so." At this moment, Wen Ting and Snow Girl's face changed at the same time, because they suddenly felt that there was an abnormal change in the surrounding space in an instant. The originally clean and fresh room suddenly became dark, and a strong evil aura completely filled the room. Everything around it changed, and the huge energy aura made the 2 extraordinary women feel suffocated. The 2 looked at each other in shock, and in the darkness, There were two kinds of lights, one red and one blue. Wen Ting stood beside Snow Girl to protect her. Snow Girl coldly snorted, and her hands formed a strange seal in front of her chest. A dark green light gushed out from between her breasts, and condensed into a round mirror in front of her chest. The dark green mirror was bright, and the evil aura immediately dispersed when it came in contact with the dark green light. Although it still surrounded their delicate bodies, the pressure was greatly reduced, and the light emitted by Wen Ting and Snow Girl suddenly increased. Wen Ting shouted in a low voice, "Who is it?" This was the Dragonfield courtyard, and there were at least 5 Zodiac Guardian God Warriors here. The other party was able to sneak in without a sound, and it could be seen how strong they were. With Wen Ting's strength compared to the Zodiac Guardian God Warriors, perhaps only Ryue could compare to her, but at this moment, she was still suppressed to the point where it was difficult to bear. This kind of tyrannical aura was something that even Chi Yu couldn't achieve. She really couldn't imagine what kind of powerful evil force would come to cause trouble for her. A low voice sounded in the room, "I have no evil intentions, but you don't have much time." The voice came from all directions, so Wen Ting and Snow Girl couldn't determine the other party's position. Wen Ting said coldly, "Who are you? What's the point of hiding? Come out." "You don't need to know who I am. You only need to know that Chi Yu is in a life and death situation. If you want him to live, don't interrupt me." The low voice sounded very neutral, and it was hard to tell the gender of the person. Hearing this, Wen Ting and Snow Girl couldn't help but change their expressions. Snow Girl was the first to lose her patience and shouted, "Tell me, what did you do to Dad? I don't believe you can hurt Dad." Although she said that, her heart was already trembling. After all, the enemy in front of them had already shocked them too much. With this kind of strength, it was definitely not impossible to deal with Chi Yu. "It's not that I did anything to them, it's that he brought himself to the abyss of death. Now only you can save him. Watch." As he said that, the darkness in the room suddenly brightened. A circular light shone from the window, and the light gradually spread until it was a meter in diameter. At the beginning, the light in the circular light was blurry. Not long after, the light began to change. First, it was the scenery, followed by people. At this time, it was the moment when Chi Yu's nature energy and life chi were being absorbed by Yum. Wen Ting and Snow Girl's hearts tightened at the same time. They saw the green light condensing on Chi Yu's body and the painful expression on Chi Yu's face. Their hearts were in their throats, even though it was just an illusory scene. However, they knew very well that it was difficult to fake, because Chi Yu's nature energy was not something that outsiders could know. "No, that's impossible. How did it become like this?" Wen Ting and Snow Girl exclaimed in unison. The mysterious person did not speak, but the voice in the light in front of them already sounded. The entire process from Yumu rushing out from the Kirin Pearl to the showdown between Yu Yun and Yumu was displayed in front of the two girls. They clearly saw the despair and deathly stillness on Chi Yu's face. Wen Ting's heart trembled. "No! All of this is happening right now. Right now, the life chi in Chi Yu's body has dried up. The energy in his body is also completely depleted, and the only people who can save his life are you." The deep voice sounded again. At this moment, Wen Ting and Snow Girl could not care less about the other party's identity. Wen Ting asked impatiently, "How can we save Chi Yu? What do you want in return?" The deep voice said, "I don't want anything, I just want to help you. Don't think that just because you have an evil aura, you must be an evil person. However, if you want to save him now, you must pay the price with your life." Chi Yu, this fool, fought with so many powerful masters, his energy has been greatly depleted, and now, the Greek girl has absorbed all the essence in his body. His life chi has dried up. Even with my powerful strength, I can't save his life. To save him, there are only two ways. No one was more familiar with the aura of Chi Yu than Wen Ting. She and Chi Yu had both transformed into the sun, moon and stars' crimson gold armor. Looking at the image of Chi-Yu, she knew that what the mysterious man said was true. Chi-Yu was indeed at the critical moment of life and death. The life Chi and Chi-Yu's origin of nature had been linked together. Once the life Chi-Yu's origin of nature was exhausted, the life Chi-Yu's origin of nature would naturally dry up. This situation was already a situation of certain death, so now she was completely confused. Hearing that there were two ways to save Chi-Yu, she immediately grasped at the life-saving straw and hurriedly asked, "What are the ways? Please tell us." In order to save Chi-Yu, her tone was much gentler. The mysterious man said, "The first way is to find the Nuwa stone. Not to mention that he is not dead yet, even if he is dead, as long as his body has not decayed, the Nuwa stone can forcibly condense his soul and bring him back to life. The divine power in the Nuwa stone can reawaken his life and the origin of nature. At the same time, it can inject a certain amount of energy to completely restore his body functions." The hope that had just been ignited in Wen-Ting and Snow Girl immediately cooled down after hearing this, as if it was poured with ice water. Although the Nuwa stone was only the last of the 10 great artifacts, without the energy support of Chi-Yu, it was impossible for them to return to the ancient beast. Where could they find the Nuwa stone? Snow Girl said anxiously, "What is the second way?" The mysterious man sighed deeply and said, "Although the Nuwa stone is good, it is really difficult for you to get it, even with the Kuan Song mirror. But the second way is easier, and it is also something that you can achieve. That is what I said before, you have to pay the price." Chi-Yu's current physical condition couldn't be worse. Not only was his energy exhausted, but more importantly, his life aura was fading with the origin of nature. To save him, you have to start from two aspects. First, you have to recondense his life aura. Second, you have to replenish a large amount of energy for his body and integrate it with the new life aura. Only in this way can his energy aura be restored. But Chi-Yu's life aura is integrated with the energy of nature. Therefore, in order to recondense his life aura, you have to first reawaken the origin of nature. This requires the purest and largest amount of energy of nature and life aura. In this world, I am afraid that only you, the Emperor's Heart Snow Lotus, can do this. Only the spiritual energy of heaven and earth that you are endowed with can reignite his life aura in the dead silence. As for replenishing energy, the first thing you have to do is to make sure that it does not conflict with his original aura, and you have to be familiar with his energy characteristics without consuming a large amount of energy. In order to achieve this, the giant beast relic is obviously the best choice. Now, do you understand what I mean? Wen-Ting looked at Snow Girl. Snow Girl's eyes were a little dull, but there was a very gentle look in the depths of her eyes. Wen-Ting said, "Must it be the Emperor's Heart Snow Lotus? What if it is only the giant beast relic?" "Mother, I am willing to give up everything for father." Snow Girl woke up from her daze and looked at Wen-Ting. 2 streams of tears flowed down her pretty face. Her mind was filled with everything that had happened since she met Chi-Yu. In a low voice, she said, "Of course not, otherwise I wouldn't have said it. Without the Emperor's Heart Snow Lotus as a guide, even if your giant beast relic can bring more energy to Chi-Yu, it is impossible for him to stay. It will only quickly disappear. At most, it will prolong his life for a period of time. It cannot solve the problem. If we want him to be reborn, we need the two of you." Hearing this, Wen-Ting suddenly became clear-headed and said coldly, "What's the point of saying so much? We can all see Chi-Yu's situation. He is currently in the West, and it is impossible for him to wait for us to arrive. If that was the case, I would not have said so much to you. I have a way to send you to his side immediately. As for how you decide, it is up to you." Chi Xian, that idiot, sigh. The mysterious voice disappeared, and the huge evil energy in the air began to fluctuate violently. The light and shadow at the window had disappeared when the evil energy fluctuated, and all the evil energy gathered there, forming a huge black vortex. Chapter 208. When Ting and Snow Girl looked at each other, even though they felt a little uneasy in the face of this evil aura, Chi-Yu looked so dangerous in the image that they had no time to think about it. The two women moved almost at the same time and floated into the black vortex. The evil aura flowed, and the vortex swallowed their bodies in an instant. In the blink of an eye, the two women disappeared along with the black aura, and the room returned to normal. Chi-Yu did not close his eyes. The last bit of death energy in his body could no longer sustain his life. After all, no matter what kind of energy it was, it needed a carrier to keep it from dissipating. Now that he had lost the most basic life energy of a human, he no longer had this carrier. At the same time, he had completely lost his bodily functions. Yuma looked at Chi-Yu with tearful eyes. At this last moment, she hoped that every part of Chi-Yu would be deeply imprinted in her memory. Although she had successfully obtained the divine artifact of the goddess Athena, there was a flaw in her divine spark, and this flaw was Chi-Yu. Even if Chi-Yu died, this flaw would exist forever. Just as everyone quietly looked at the dying Chi-Yu, just as Yu Yun recalled everything that had happened between him and Chi-Yu, and recalled the heroic manner in which Chi-Yu defeated 4 red-robed bishops by himself. Just as everyone was waiting for death to come to him, something strange suddenly happened. Light flickered and the sky suddenly darkened. Pope Marty's expression changed slightly. He looked up into the sky, and the divine energy that had locked onto the 5 constellation guardians suddenly shrouded the sky. However, his expression immediately changed, because the powerful pressure that appeared in the sky was something that even he could not resist. The pressure that was filled with evil aura only lasted for a moment before disappearing. Then, a huge black vortex appeared out of thin air, and the tip of the vortex, which was also the source of the vortex, actually pierced Chi-Yu's chest at lightning speed. Yumu's body trembled. She had already retracted the 3 divine artifacts of Athena, and she felt a strong vibration force pushing her body away. Just like Malti, she also noticed the tyrannical power of the evil energy. At this moment, her mind was completely focused on Chi-Yu. Unable to react in time, she was sent flying. She flipped a few times in the air, and landed on the ground like a fairy descending from the 9 heavens. The black vortex only appeared for a moment before disappearing. She disappeared into Chi-Yu's chest. At this time, Chi-Yu's body did not fall to the ground because of Yumu's departure. 2 graceful figures appeared beside him, and the red figure hugged him tightly. Another blue figure appeared beside him. Chi-Yu. When Ting cried out in sorrow. The figures who suddenly appeared were Wen Ting and Snow Girl. Although they did not know what force sent them there, it was proven that everything they saw was real. When Wen Ting came into contact with Chi-Yu's body, she immediately felt the current state of Chi-Yu's body. Chi-Yu's originally calm and dead eyes suddenly widened a little. Looking at Wen Ting and Snow Girl, there was a hint of life in her eyes. PM Chongbao? However, that hint of life was filled with guilt. Why are you guys here? The energy before her death could no longer support her to speak clearly. Wen Ting shook her head forcefully. It was the first time she saw Chi-Yu in such a weak state. Even when Chi-Yu used the ultimate Kirin's arm and later fought against the Bull Demon King during the Ancient Beast era, he had never been like this. Every inch of her skin and every cell was filled with the aura of death. Daddy, how did you become like this? Snow Girl held Chi-Yu's big hand tightly. Her cold little hand was constantly trembling. Chi-Yu sighed deeply. I can only blame myself for all this. I thought too much and I was too stupid. I'm sorry, Ting, Snow Girl. After I die, you must take good care of yourselves. If there's an afterlife, I will use all my time to make up for the friendship you've shown me in this life. No, I don't want an afterlife. I only want this life. Daddy, you're the one who kept me alive. You're the one who made me return to normal. If it weren't for you, I'm afraid I'd still be living in fear and confusion. Daddy, for you, Snow Girl is willing to pay any price. Daddy, you won't die. You'll never die. Daddy, do you know that? In fact, after I woke up, after we reached the ancient beast era, I've already. At this point, Snow Girl's eyes suddenly lit up. Her shining eyes turned completely ice blue. She said to Chi-Yu in an extremely firm tone, Daddy, I love you. Chi-Yu's eyes revealed a hint of surprise. Wen-Ting, who was supporting him and constantly pouring energy into his body, also trembled slightly. Chi-Yu and Wen-Ting felt completely different. In Chi-Yu's mind, Snow Girl was clearly expressing her love to him. However, Wen-Ting felt completely different. In fact, how could she not see that Snow Girl's feelings for Chi-Yu were no longer that of a father and daughter? However, she did not point it out. PM Pet Treasure? At this time, Snow Girl bravely spoke out her inner thoughts. She had already made up her mind to exchange her life for Chi-Yu's. Looking at Snow Girl, Wen-Ting's heart was filled with gratitude. She had already thought that if everything was true, Snow Girl would definitely do that. Everyone has a selfish side, and Wen-Ting was no exception. She did not stop Snow Girl. She just looked at Snow Girl quietly with the same resolute light in her eyes. For the man in front of her, not only Snow Girl, but she was also willing to give up everything. At least compared to her own parents, they still loved each other. A smile appeared on Snow Girl's pretty face, and she said softly, Dad, can you remember how Snow Girl looks like forever? Don't ever forget that you once had a daughter like me in your life. Dad, I really love you. You must live well. No matter what, Snow Girl will be watching you from heaven. At this point, the blue light on Snow Girl's body began to change. Her body was gradually disappearing. It was condensing on the ground. Everyone, including Yumu, Yuyun, and Malti, were stunned. No one expected such a change to happen. Their emotions changed slightly as they listened to the Snow Lady's parting words. None of them moved. They just stood to the side and watched silently as if they were spectators. Chi-Yu had a bad feeling. The deathly stillness in her eyes suddenly turned into anxiety. Snow Girl, don't. At this moment, an old voice suddenly sounded. Silly child, you're still young. Why do you have to do this? Let me do it. A faint blue light surged out from Chi-Yu's chest. While the Snow Lady was still in shock, her transformation actually stopped the moment she came into contact with the blue light. When she came into contact with the blue light, her body instantly returned to its original state. Her beautiful face was filled with excitement as she looked at the blue light in front of her. The Emperor's Heart Snow Lotus Monarch appeared out of thin air. Everything that happened in the outside world had awakened him from his slumber. When Snow Girl arrived, he could already feel his daughter's aura. At the same time, he was selfish. He already knew Chi-Yu's situation and how to save her life, but he could not bear to part with his daughter. He could not bear to part with his hard-earned freedom. So, he chose to remain silent in the face of such a painful choice. However, when he heard Snow Girl's words, he understood that Chi-Yu had not only saved him, but also Snow Girl. The lives of his father and his daughter were saved by this powerful man in front of him. How could he remain silent? So, he came out. Snow Girl and the Emperor's Heart Snow Lotus Monarch looked at each other. Snow Girl softly said, Father, you've finally been saved. The Emperor's Heart Snow Lotus Monarch raised his hand and gently patted his daughter's shoulder. His eyes were filled with fatherly love. Little girl, you've grown up. In the future, you must take good care of yourself. Father is already old. Our Emperor's Heart Snow Lotus Monarch is the noblest race of plants. We can't owe others anything. From now on, you only have one father. Live well. Father's spirit in heaven hopes to see you happy forever. Don't be sad. Because, when father and you become one, you can treat him as your biological father. Or, you can also become his woman. Although he's a bit silly, but he's also the only man I've ever seen who's worthy of our Snow Girl. Snow Girl's delicate body trembled. She suddenly found that her body was completely unable to move. Ever since her body had been transformed by Chi-Yu's source of nature, Snow Girl's strength was no less than her father's. But the Emperor's Heart Snow Lotus Monarch was her father. How could she be on guard against him? She was suddenly enveloped by the blue light. Although she could feel the Emperor's Heart Snow Lotus Monarch's thoughts, she was powerless to stop it. Even her ability to speak had been sealed by the Emperor's Heart Snow Lotus Monarch. Tears continuously flowed down Snow Girl's face. The Emperor's Heart Snow Lotus Monarch took a step forward and hugged her daughter's shoulder. Then, he planted a kiss on her forehead and resolutely turned around to face Chiyu. He knew that if he kept looking at his daughter, perhaps he would never be able to make up his mind. "You've saved Snow Girl. You've also saved me. I won't say any words of thanks. I'll use everything I have to repay you for everything you've done for us. Take good care of our daughter for me, okay?" The two men's eyes met. The Emperor's Heart Snow Lotus Monarch suddenly felt very calm. He smiled. It was a smile that came from the bottom of his heart. Looking at Chiyu, he had a premonition that this man would never let his daughter suffer the slightest grievance. The blue light once again lit up. But this time, it was no longer Snow Girl. Instead, it was the Emperor's Heart Snow Lotus Monarch who had just been rescued by Chiyu from the Dark Parliament. His handsome face had a smile, as if he was facing death calmly. He deeply looked into Chiyu's grayish-white eyes. Chiyu gasped violently. At this time, he already understood that Snow Girl and the Emperor's Heart Snow Lotus Monarch were doing the same thing. No. With great difficulty, Chiyu struggled to stand up from Wenting's embrace. Originally, he had completely given up hope for his life. Suddenly, a strong desire to live rose in his heart. But, with his current physical condition, how could he stand up? Wenting's face was already covered in tears. She muttered the two words "thank you." She couldn't stop the Emperor's Heart Snow Lotus Monarch. As long as Chiyu lost the support of her energy, he would immediately die. Although the energy that entered his body would also pass away, but after all, it was the same source of energy. Chiyu's body had already been stimulated by Wenting's energy. He was already on the verge of death. Not to mention, how could she stop it? This was related to her lover. The blue light condensed on the ground into a huge flower with a diameter of 1/2 meter. This snow lotus had the color of an ice crystal. Each petal looked so crystal clear, so moving. In the center of each ice blue petal was a silver stamen. This was the symbol of the Emperor's Heart Snow Lotus Monarch. Only when the Emperor's Heart Snow Lotus reached the king level would the stamen change from white to silver. The huge flower floated up, and the ice-blue aura enveloped Chiyu's body. The tears in Snow Girl's eyes couldn't stop falling. Under the influence of her own energy, they condensed into beads of ice in the air and fell to the ground. The Emperor's Heart Snow Lotus Monarch's body slowly rotated in the air. The ice-blue light floated down, and the silver stamen transformed into a thread that entered Chiyu's mouth. At the same time, the surrounding blue petals began to quickly shrink, condensing towards the center. Under the guidance of the silver stamen, drops of blue liquid flowed into Chiyu's mouth. The sweet and cool liquid flowed into Chiyu's dry mouth. Immediately, his body began to tremble violently. The energy that was filled with life energy fully nourished his body, nourishing every cell in his body. The huge amount of life energy first spread to his limbs and bones, calling out to Chiyu's life force. When Chiyu's limbs and bones began to fill with life energy, the huge amount of life energy once again condensed into his dantian. The life energy fused with the original source of nature energy in Chiyu's body. The Emperor's Heart Snow Lotus Monarch, a heavenly treasure that had existed for tens of thousands of years. Its energy was completely absorbed from nature's heaven and earth spiritual chi, and this heaven and earth spiritual chi was undoubtedly filled with life energy. At this time, this huge amount of life energy, along with the vast heaven and earth spiritual chi, constantly filled Chiyu's body. The Emperor's Heart Snow Lotus Monarch in the air disappeared. Just as it had said, it had already completely fused with Chiyu's body. Although it had lost consciousness, it had also survived in a different state within Chi-Yu's body. It had turned into Chi-Yu's life energy, once again supporting its body that was on the verge of collapse. After all, reincarnation was one of the 3 great divine fruits bestowed by the heavens. Although the energy and aura of the origin of nature had accompanied Chi-Yu's life energy, it had been completely absorbed by Yamu. But the source of the origin of nature would not disappear. What Yamu had obtained was only energy, but the source of the origin of nature was still within Chi-Yu's body. It was just that it had already dried up. The energy of the Emperor's Heart Snow Lotus Monarch was like a clear stream, once again awakening the dried-up source of the origin of nature. A faint green light began to rise in front of Chi-Yu's chest and abdomen, greedily absorbing the life energy brought by the Emperor's Heart Snow Lotus Monarch. The deathly stillness in Chi-Yu's body suddenly disappeared a little, and the seed of life began to reappear within his body. But the life of the seed required energy. Without the support of energy, although the delicate seed still had a tail, it would quickly wither. Feeling the changes in Chi-Yu's body, Wen-Ting smiled with relief. From the moment she had appeared until the moment the Emperor's Heart Snow Lotus Monarch had sacrificed its life, she had not said a single word. She did not blame Chi-Yu, nor did she blame him for making himself like this because of another woman. When she clearly discovered that the seed of life had begun to have a tail, she began to tighten her grip on Chi-Yu's body. Holding Chi-Yu, she stood up straight and pressed her delicate body completely against his back. "Don't be sad, don't be sad. Perhaps all of this is destined by the heavens. Chi-Yu, you are a man, I believe you will definitely stand up again, right? Don't do stupid things. One day when you really reach that realm, I will definitely stand in front of you, alive and well." The fiery red energy began to burn. What Wen-Ting was burning was her own body. In an instant, the clothes on her body disappeared. Wen-Ting's body had already become like a sparkling ruby. That huge temperature even made Yamu involuntarily take a few steps back. Looking at Wen-Ting and the snow girl in front of Chi-Yu, her dull eyes revealed a trace of ecstasy. But, in that ecstasy there was also a deep loneliness and a trace of fear. "Ting-Ting, quickly stop, don't be like this. If you sacrifice yourself to save me, then I will also not live alone." Chi-Yu's heart was shocked. At this moment, he had already completely understood the snow girl and Wen-Ting's actions. In order to save him, they actually had to sacrifice 2 lives. He regretted, really regretted. If it wasn't because he was too soft on women and didn't have enough space for Yamu, how could they become like this? Wen-Ting did not stop her actions. "Fool, it's too late. I have already ignited my own relic. Although I have completely absorbed the energy of the Almighty Beast relic, my entire body is still that of the Almighty Beast relic. As long as you can live, no matter what price I have to pay, I am willing. I'm willing. Don't be silly. I won't really die. Have you forgotten? I have told you before, if you are willing, even if I lose my body, my spirit will still live in your heart. Work hard, I hope to see my man standing at the peak. At that time, perhaps you will have enough power to resurrect me and reconstruct my body? I will quietly wait in your body for that moment to come. Chi-Yu, take good care of our baby daughter, take good care of yourself." At the same time that the ruby body turned dark red, the burning red light began to merge with Chi-Yu's body as if it was melting. An incomparably large amount of energy condensed into a huge dark red cocoon, enveloping Chi-Yu's body completely. His body could no longer be seen from the outside. The instant before Chi-Yu's body disappeared from the dark red cocoon, Yamu clearly saw a pair of reddish gold wings emerge from Chi-Yu's back, shining with a faint light. All the energy in the dark red cocoon was completely condensed and did not radiate outward. The faint light began to fluctuate continuously, and every time it fluctuated, there would be a slight change. Suddenly, a red cloud appeared in the sky, like a burning cloud, floating above the dark red cocoon. With the dark red cocoon as the center, the air around it began to distort violently. The light shone brightly, like a giant ruby standing there, unmoving. As the Emperor's Heart Snow Lotus King's body completely disappeared and its energy was completely assimilated by Chi-Yu, the restrictions he had on Snow Girl also disappeared. Snow Girl cried out in sorrow and fell to her knees. Even though the light from the dark red cocoon made her feel extremely uncomfortable, she did not have the slightest intention of leaving. It had been so many years, and she had finally seen her biological parents again, but all she had done was say a few words, and her father had left her forever. She would rather be the one to disappear. Tears flowed down her face, and Snow Girl's mind began to waver. In her extreme sorrow, she had even forgotten to protect Wen-Ting and Snow Girl. Yuyun raised her hand to cover her mouth. Her eyes, red from crying, revealed a strange light. There was envy and jealousy in that light, but most of it was confusion. Ever since she had found out about her birth, she had been constantly working hard to get the goddess of Athena back. Everything she had done was for this goal. However, at this moment, she realized that her inner world was so empty. She secretly asked herself, if it was her, would she have risked her life to save Chi-Yu? She had naturally seen Wen-Ting before. The former English teacher, the former #1 beauty of Qingbei University. For Chi-Yu, she had unhesitatingly sacrificed her precious life, burning herself as the price to inject energy into Chi-Yu's body. Was she stupid? No, she was not stupid. Everything she had done was also for the sake of a belief. But what had she done? How sad, how lamentable. Was obtaining the goddess of Athena really that important to her? If it wasn't for the fight between her and Yamu, how could everything have happened today? Yuyun's heart had changed in a special way, but Yamu's pain was much deeper than hers. She had harmed Chi-Yu. In order to obtain more power, she had harmed the man she had fallen in love with. And a woman who also loved him was willing to sacrifice her life for him. Although she was now the real goddess of Athena, Yamu suddenly felt that she was so small in front of Wen-Ting. He still has a chance to live. Miss Yamu, we must take action. The dark red cocoon formed in front of Marty's eyes, and he immediately woke up. Even if he could summon the two strongest archangels at the same time, he definitely did not have the confidence to win against an Eastern powerhouse who could defeat 4 red-cloaked archbishop. Chi-Yu's power filled his heart with a sense of danger, so he immediately reminded Yamu, who was beside him. Yamu could no longer breathe due to the pain in her heart. She looked at Marty with a blank and lifeless gaze. Despicable! Yuyun shouted angrily, pointing at Marty. I am ashamed to have a leader like you in the Vatican. Don't you think that your inner world is too despicable and shameless? What did Chi-Yu do wrong? If it wasn't for him, would Yamu have such power now? You've already used him to achieve your goal. Now that he finally has a chance to live, you still want to destroy him? Marty said coldly, if he dies, everything will be very peaceful. But if he really survives, Miss Yuyun, have you ever thought about what would happen? If a super powerhouse like him insists on taking revenge, even if Miss Yamu has become the real goddess Athena, I'm afraid that it will be very difficult for her to do so. Moreover, this person still has a powerful force in the East. Once he makes a comeback, it will be a huge crisis for the Western world. Yamu's gaze gradually brightened as she looked at Marty. Could she really lay her hands on Chi-Yu? Could she still? No, definitely not. Yamu firmly told herself in the depths of her heart. In order to become the real goddess Athena, she had already harmed the man she loved deeply once, but that was because she had no other choice. If she did not absorb the energy of the entire origin of nature, she would not be able to fuse with the divine weapon. However, it was different now. Chi-Yu had a chance to live. Now that she had woken up, her heart was filled with joy and excitement. Although she knew that Chi-Yu would never forgive her and she did not have any extravagant hopes, the joy that came from the bottom of her heart still eased a lot of the pain in her heart. Just as Yamu was about to speak, Yuyun interrupted. Let's make a deal, Yamu. Yamu was stunned. Deal? What kind of deal? Yuyun took a deep breath. She suddenly realized that her ambition and the hatred in her heart had completely disappeared after seeing Wen Ting sacrifice her life for Qiyu. Let Qiyu go. As long as you're willing to let Qiyu go, I will never have any other thoughts in the future. I will willingly become the constellation guardian of Gemini. Your 12 constellation guardians will also be completely loyal to you. Yuma looked at her in shock. She did not expect Yuyun to say such a thing. She felt that it was a little strange. Sister, Yuyun said coldly, otherwise, even if I die, I will not return to Greece. Malty's expression changed. Miss Yumu, this. Yuma shook her head, stopping Malty from speaking any further. Her figure flashed, and she appeared beside the dark red cocoon. She said in a low voice, Your Highness, thank you for your help this time. Greece will always remember your friendship. However, for the sake of the Constellation Guardians, I have already made up my mind. I hope you can understand. Looking at Yumu's determined gaze, then looking at the dark red cocoon, Malty sighed. In that case, if there are any problems in the future, I hope Miss Yumu will take the initiative to bear it. After saying that, he no longer had any reason to stay here. The scepter in his hand emitted 4 beams of holy light, and his body disappeared. Under the shroud of the 4 beams of holy light, the unconscious bodies of the 4 cardinals were taken away by him at the same time. Less than a minute after the Pope left, the dark red light suddenly disappeared, and Wen Ting's figure disappeared. Qiyu stood there with a blank expression. His body was completely naked, and his gaze was terrifyingly calm. Behind him, a pair of pure gold wings spread out on both sides of his body. He pulled Snow Girl over and turned his gaze to Yum. A voice that sounded like it came from the depths of hell came out of his mouth. On the 10th of January next year, bring your constellation guardians to the summit of Mount Everest to end everything between us.